Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1572 of the War News stream. And tonight we have very big news out of Russia and also out of the Middle East as well. I'm sure y'all have seen that today. But we're currently seeing that Russia has begun urgently evacuating the command from their naval bases in Crimea, specifically near Sevastapol, for some unknown reason. But we have a clue of why they're doing that. We'll get into that here in just a minute. But we're also seeing that a massive oil disaster has erupted in Russia after last night's strikes, with an oil volcano starting in Rubinsk, Russia. We're also seeing that Britain grew some balls today and seized an oil tanker, a Russian Shadow Fleet tanker, of course, amid the war threats from Vladimir Putin. So we have a lot of news today, and also possibly the U.S. to surrender to Iran, but we'll get to that later. But it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news from around the world, as we have been able to get incredibly large news out of Eastern Europe and a little bit of news out of the Middle East over the course of this day. We have been able to see that the Russian Federation's Black Sea Fleet Command and some elements of the Black Sea Fleet's auxiliary and support forces have now begun evacuations, according to insider reports from the key port of Sevastapol, where Russian Black Sea Fleet operations have been based for several centuries and are now completely moving all of their operations to the Vostochny Run in the Novorossiysk city area on the Russian mainland on the east coast of the Black Sea. This is coming as the supply situation has now become completely untenable within the entirety of the Crimean Oblast and appears to be worsening with each passing day. While no official orders have been given for the Russian Black Sea Fleet's command and auxiliary forces to retreat out of the city of Sevastopol, it appears that the orders are being given by the lower level commanders that are in charge of these facilities and these personnel as well, which are already moving out of the Crimean area. We've also been able to see that Crimea has continued to come under significant strikes over the course of the day by the armed forces of Ukraine, in the midst of other major strikes that have been landed throughout the Russian Federation within the Tula region, and we've also gotten further updates on the Azot chemical plant fire within the Tula Oblast, and also the major oil fire that has now turned into a disaster within the area of Rubinsk. The oil fire Rabensk has turned into an unmitigated crisis, and at the moment, the multiple oil tanks that have been ruptured and are burning are billowing thick columns of smoke that are now extending several hundred miles to the southeast over Yaroslavl, Ivanovo, and almost all the way down to Nizhny Novgorod. At the moment, oil rains are beginning to fall in the entirety of this area, covering most of the surrounding terrain and also water surfaces with a thick black film of oil from the burning oil fires. We've also been able to understand as well that this fire is apparently being rekindled by continued Ukrainian attacks, as some smaller attacks against the facility were also seen over the course of the day. In the midst of this bleak situation that is now gripping the western regions of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin has been out today continuing to stay on the propaganda rounds, even as some members of the Russian State Duma have started to openly state that Putin is conducting ineffective leadership inside the Russian Federation and the ongoing war in Ukraine. We've been able to see that Putin did meet some soldiers today and largely blessed them for death at the front lines, and we've also been able to see that 2 more Russian generals have been purged over the course of the day, one of them falling quite literally from a 10-story window, and they explained it away as an unfortunate accident. Moving us on out of that little bit of details in the Russian Federation, the Ukrainian armed forces have also been conducting their continued long-range strikes against the M14 highway and critical supply lines in Donetsk and Rostov, as today the absolute death knell news came out that both Rostov Oblast and Donetsk are also running into fuel shortages as well, which was expected yesterday and was announced today. This now means that the last gas stations leading into the occupied territories of Ukraine are also going to be dispensing fuel in limited quantities, now meaning that there will be no supplies transferred to Crimea, as there is no way to get a truck even into Crimea and back without it running out of fuel, because now it is going to have to fuel up at another oblast that may not be in a fuel shortage, which is going to be much farther away than Rostov on Don to even attempt to make the venture in. We've also been able to see additionally that the city of Kyiv has come under significant attack just before the stream, along with several other major Ukrainian cities, by the Russian Federation, with an unfortunate casualty tonight of a 1,000-year-old monastery inside of Kyiv, which now appears to be burning profusely and also appears to have suffered critical and possibly irreparable damage from the Russian attack that appears to have targeted the city directly and the monastery itself. We've also seen that the Royal Marine Commandos within the English Channel have also boarded and seized a Russian shadow tanker within the English Channel today. This shadow tanker appears to have been unescorted by Russian naval vessels, and this is the first such action that the Royal Navy and the Royal Marines have taken around the area of direct British waters to be able to board and seize a Russian shadow tanker. We have not seen an official Russian response at the moment yet, but we are expecting a Russian response will be coming around probably within the next several hours, and we'll most likely see that further armed standoffs and rising tensions will permeate British waters after this action today. In the midst of this, we have been able to hear that the United States appears to have conceded and surrendered to the Islamic Republic of Iran over the course of the day, as we're now hearing that the United States has largely agreed to most of Iran's terms and have largely given them what we can describe as a peace deal that gives them almost everything they want and almost absolutely nothing that the United States wanted. This also comes at the same time as some people are knocking each other's teeth out on the south lawn of the White House. So we're going to be making sure to get into all of this news tonight, starting with our largest stories first and then moving our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the night. But before we get into that, I do have to say that tonight is a Sunday night fundraiser, and tonight we have a Sunday night fundraiser for none other than the amazing Razum for Ukraine, an incredible fundraiser that has been helping to save lives in Ukraine for years, and hopefully we'll be able to see that the fundraiser tonight can hit the $2,500 goal and make sure to help out the people in Ukraine, which are continuing to struggle for the freedom of their own nation and their citizenry against the ongoing Russian invasion. But with that in mind, it is time for us to get on into the major news that we have for the day, and it does appear that we are getting new footage out of Kyiv at this moment, which we'll be making sure to cover here very soon, as we'll be getting into the Kyiv attacks very soon here in the news, but it actually appears that might be breaking. So what do we got?
Okay, so real quick, we are going to get into the Kyiv attacks, but unfortunately, we are seeing some very large attacks on Ukraine's capital this evening of Kyiv, and it looks like I'm seeing video after video coming out showing Russian Zircon hypersonic cruise missiles going right into the middle of Kyiv. Unfortunately, we have seen that one of Kyiv's largest and most historic monasteries has been directly targeted by the Russian regime, which of course is obviously not a military target. It's a church that they've apparently hit. So very bad scenes. I'm still tracking that happening right now. It looks like the attack might have concluded as of about 10 or 15 minutes ago, but a very vicious, a very nasty attack that Russia's conducted here, targeting civilians specifically.
And we will be making sure to get into that footage and that report here soon, as it does appear that we are seeing more air defenses being fired off over the city of Kyiv at this moment right now while we're live on air, and we have been able to see of significant losses, at least in cultural and material value, in the city of Kyiv from the attacks that have been conducted over the past 2 hours on the city and also other major cities within Ukraine. But with that in mind, we are going to be making sure to move into our major news for the night, which is going to be taking us immediately and on down and into the area of Crimea. Many of you will know that the Crimean Peninsula has started to be put into a situation that can only be described as absolutely hopeless for the Russian Federation, its armed forces, and the people who live in Sevastapol within the occupied regions. As of today, news came out that the Rostov Oblast and Donetsk are now putting fuel limits on purchases as well. This is quite literally the last nail in the coffin for the Crimean Peninsula, and this is now showing us that there will be absolutely no supplies making it into the Crimean Peninsula at this point in time, as we're now hearing that there is a limit of 50 liters on gasoline and 100 liters of diesel fuel per vehicle. This means that even supply trucks that are attempting to make it into the area of Crimea are only going to be able to refuel with roughly about 25 gallons, or I believe it's 20 to 25 gallons of diesel fuel before they try and make the long and arduous trip, 850 miles both ways round trip, actually 850 miles round trip, to be able to try and drop off any supplies in Crimea and to also try and battle the extremely dangerous, if not near guaranteed death sentence of the M14 highway. As of today, Rostov and Donetsk has now finally entered a fuel shortage, much like of multiple other dozens of oblasts throughout the Russian Federation within this region, now meaning that supply availability to Crimea does not exist any longer. As a result of this, there are now reports coming out that the Black Sea Fleet is now finally abandoning their last holdouts in Sevastopol. Many of y'all will know that the combat portions and elements of the surface combatants and also the submersibles, like the Kilo-class submarines that were based at Sevastopol at the beginning of the war, had long since evacuated due to the threat of Ukrainian strikes hitting the vessels while they were in port and destroying them to the port of Novorossiysk to be able to avoid being in range of direct and imminent Ukrainian attacks on the daily. At the moment, we understand that there are still some Russian Black Sea Fleet elements that are still in Sevastopol, but they are not the critical, what we would describe as capital ships of the Russian Black Sea Fleet that have already been diverted to Novorossiysk. These remaining vessels within the port would include coastal patrol vessels of the Russian Coast Guard and the Russian Navy, as well as support ships such as Rapucha-class landing ships and Alligator support ships, among several others, which still call the port of Sevastopol their home, and have generally not been considered a high priority by the Ukrainians to be targeted and destroyed or to be put under such a significant threat of destruction that they would be evacuated to Novorossiysk. We also understand that some of the headquarters elements of the Black Sea Fleet, pretty much all of them, still operate out of Sevastopol, and while most of the surface combatants that they command are over in Novorossiysk, the actual command staff are still in Sevastopol, operating most of these situation out of this area. As of today, we are now hearing that those forces are beginning to apparently evacuate their command posts within Sevastopol. Sources inside the Russian Navy and the Ukrainian partisan network Atesh, which has been incredibly reliable in its coverage, have reported that officers have already started moving families and property before any official order has been received, and you wouldn't believe to where, to Novorossiysk. It now appears that at the moment, while official orders have not been given to abandon Sevastopol, the Russian Navy is in the process of abandoning their last posts and operational facilities within the port of Sevastopol due to the fact that fuel is no longer available and most semblances of civilized life are beginning to disappear throughout the entirety of the oblast, also including the city of Sevastopol itself. For this reason, they're now picking up and moving out entirely back to the Russian mainland. We also understand that this is very reflective of the supply situation at large throughout the entirety of the peninsula. We have seen that there are Russian army elements that also appear to be evacuating as well, and as we have already reported over the past several weeks, it does appear that supply lines have largely ceased to exist throughout the entirety of the Crimean Oblast, and we've also been able to see that the river bridges at the Chonhar Strait, including the pontoon bridge, have been destroyed, and the canal bridge near Armyansk has also been destroyed as well, with no earthen berm being created to be able to pass over the dry canal. The Kerch Bridge also has significant weight limitations put onto it of 1.5 tons maximum weight per vehicle, meaning that Russian supply trucks are not able to make it into Crimea via the Kerch Bridge, now meaning that Crimea has been completely supply isolated on all aspects at every end, both civilian and military, and the situation has been rapidly deteriorating. We've already seen that fuel is completely run out as of yesterday throughout the entirety of Crimea. We've also seen that grocery stores are now having to put purchase limits on every single type of item in the store per customer per order, so that way they can try and stretch the food supplies that are going to be dwindling into non-existence here within the very near future. And we've already seen that all public transportation in Crimea has also ground to a complete halt as well, as there's no longer any fuel to be able to run them, whether they be road or railroad based. This means that Crimea is largely seeing its final days of any semblance of activity by the Russian army or by the Russian occupational forces within the area. And right now, a lot of people are starting to wonder, as of this announcement today, what is going to be happening to Sevastapol, and not only that, the whole of Crimea, considering that the last elements of the Russian Black Sea Fleet and its command forces are beginning to pack up and move before the Russian Federation has even given them official orders. Some would even describe this as a possible desertion or an abandonment of their posts, considering that there has not been an official order to evacuate, yet they're evacuating entirely on their own because the supply side situation is that bad. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so that's very big news, by the way. Like, granted, there's not a whole bunch of the Russian Black Sea Fleet command infrastructure left inside of Crimea, but the little bit that is left that's currently inside of Sevastopol is apparently now evacuating their top commanders out of Crimea completely and back into the Russian mainland. And I wonder why they're doing that. I wonder if it has something to do with the Storm Shadow missiles that keep flying down there at their headquarters building. That might have something to do with it, but the commanders are getting the hell out of there or very quick. And we just heard that today from Ukrainian sources. So what do you think's going on? 53% said the Russian military will completely withdraw from Crimea in the near future and probably slowly over time. 34% said only Russia's top people are leaving, and 5% said seems very small, it's no big deal. So for just some backstory, by the way, the Russian Black Sea Fleet has largely been pretty much evacuated out of here for a very long time. The ships that are left are basically support ships. They're not like main warship type deals that you think about in your head. If you think about big battleships, it's not that. The Ukrainians ran them off a long time ago by attacking those in the ports. But what is left behind is a whole bunch of command structure to command the fleet from that area. That is what's left behind. But now that Crimea is becoming an island and it's being isolated completely from the Russian Federation, now the top commanders are deciding it might be best to leave. And also, of course, Ukraine did just missile the Air Force headquarters at the Sevastopol naval base. They did hit that yesterday or a couple of days ago with missiles, and I think that might be scaring the commanders off a bit. I think they might want to leave and go back to mainland Russia. So I would say I'm with the 34%. I would say that right now, Russia's top people are leaving, but they're going to leave everybody else behind because they don't care about the regular soldiers. But the commanders, they're going to get themselves out of harm's way. So I'm with the 34%. I think it's only the commanders leaving for right now. But Enforcer, what say you?
What's interesting about this is that technically they're not going back to Russia. They've literally been in Crimea since the start. The Black Sea Fleet was founded by the Russian Empire in 1787, and since then it has been in Sevastopol, in that port since 1787 up until the modern day. It has been reformed and restructured several times throughout the centuries, one from the Russian Empire to the Soviet Union, and then from the Soviet Union into the Russian Federation's Navy. But the Black Sea Fleet in its whole has been in Sevastopol since 1787, which is over 200 years ago. I think it's 240 years ago, if we're being precise, or somewhere close to that. The reality of the fact is that if they are evacuating the port facilities, which have been built up for 240 years to house and operate the Russian Black Sea Fleet, the situation has become absolutely untenable for the Russian Navy and for the Russian forces that are here within the oblast. Picking up everybody that's left in Sevastopol, which is mostly command staff, but there's also a couple of other vessels that I think we have to make honorable mention of because they do still operate out of Sevastopol because there's really nowhere else to put them. There are the incredibly really old Alligator-class landing ships, which operate out of Sevastopol still, along with the more modern Rapucha-class landing ships, and also some patrol boats and coastal defense vessels like this one here of the Russian Coast Guard, which still operate and are moored in Sevastopol port and still require operational services, staff, and sailors to be able to operate the ships and to keep them rolling, or to at least keep them from rotting in port and then sinking to the bottom once the hull corrodes enough. That is something that we have to point out that is incredibly important. If the command staff are leaving because the supply situation is completely hopeless for them, they're going to have to pick these ships up and also all of their personnel as well and bring them over to Novorossiysk, most likely along with the rest of the Black Sea Fleet that's now all the way over there in the port of Novorossiysk. And that is showing us right now that the rest of the Russian military is most likely going to be following suit. As far as the Russian Navy's elements are concerned in Crimea, they are probably the least resource intensive out of any of the units there. The Russian Air Force and the Russian Air Defense forces within the area consume a great deal more of fuel and ammunition than the Russian Navy ever has in years out of Sevastopol, because hardly any of those ships ever operate anymore, and they're basically sitting at port and manned like a ship at sea when you can literally walk off of it and right into the city that it's docked at. So I would believe that this is showing us right now that while we haven't seen the actual reports coming out yet in full-on proof that the Russian Federation is evacuating the rest of Crimea, I have a feeling that there are other units that are making their own decision to pick up and try and move out of Crimea however they can, whether it be via the land bridge or going across the Kerch Bridge if possible and to Novorossiysk. But it's not like the situation in Novorossiysk is any better at this moment. A complete fuel shortage has also reached Novorossiysk today as well, meaning that the last entrance, or really the last major city to the gateway to Crimea via the Kerch Bridge, has also been put out of operation as well. And a single Russian citizen made a video today, apparently some sort of a vlogger that makes life hack videos on how to live in wartime conditions, and they actually let us in on a lot of interesting details on life in Novorossiysk that we have not heard before here on this channel, and I don't really think many people have heard elsewhere. So here's the clip, and I'll be reading the translation of the guy speaking at the bottom of the screen. Listen up, people. This is effed. Tell me some effing life hacks. I'm effing shocked. Whatever. We learned to live in Novorossiysk without water, learned to live without power, learned to live without internet. We adapt to everything without anything, but without gas, how the F are we supposed to live? There's absolutely zero gas around. Not a single gas station has gas. What the F do we do? What are the effing life hacks to live without gas? What kind of effing apps do I need to download? How do you trick the system? Honestly, I'm already losing it. I've checked 7 gas stations. There's not a single one with gas. And so
holy cow, what does this guy do for a career? What is he, a sailor? The way this guy's cussing right here, he's dropping the F-bomb in literally every sentence. Like, this dude might have been in the Navy.
Man, honestly, man, I was having to, do, AI in my head and be like, how do I censor that? I was like, damn, this is really tough. This is like a speed run to see a YouTube age restrictor show if I get one word wrong. But nevertheless, it is showing that according to the citizens of Novorossiysk, it now appears that Novorossiysk on the mainland is now in the same situation that Sevastopol is in on the island of Crimea, or really the peninsula of Crimea, where they do not have fuel either, and it also appears that most semblances of modern life have already ceased to exist in most of Novorossiysk. We also know that just across the way in Grushovaya Balka, over the mountain ranges that create the Novorossiysk Valley, the satellite images are depicting a general image of absolute desolation and destruction. Most of the oil facility at Grushovaya Balka has suffered some form of damage to some degree in the prior weeks of attacks. And we understand that there has been a large amount of the tanks at the tank farm that have been hit on the northwestern side of the facility, several of them within the central area, a couple within the northern area of the facility, and one of them within the southeastern area of the facility. This is showing us the Ukrainian tanks are continuing to piecemeal their way through every single one of these storage tanks at the Grushovaya Balka complex, which supplies fuel for export to the port of Novorossiysk over the mountains and in the valley below in the city. And this is also showing us that once again the Ukrainians are completely depriving the Russian Federation of any way to make money, or much less any way to keep life rolling in most of the Russian Federation. It's rapidly coming to an end. We've also been able to see that the Ukrainian armed forces continued more attacks against the Russian forces in occupied Crimea. This footage here being put out by the 40th Marine Brigade of some of their boat-launched drone attacks that were conducted on the coast. We can actually see here some of these vessels making their way out. This one, I gotta say, folks, I don't know what this one is. It's equipped with some form of what looks to be man pads, or at least man-portable air defense systems that have been mounted on a rack, six on each side. So this thing seems to have 12 rounds of man-pad missiles, 12 missiles to fire at enemy aircraft, possibly, in the Black Sea, which is kind of wild. I've never seen a drone like that.
I guess you could really say that Ukraine has a navy at this point, because if they have an entire fleet of different variants of drone boats like that that are clearly capable, I mean, they've done a number on the Russian Navy over the years. I mean, is Ukraine really navyless at this point? I would argue that's their navy.
I would say that they have a navy, but the entire thing is made up of an unmanned systems flotilla. Is probably the best way to describe it at this point. And we can see them launching FPV drones directly on the Crimean coast to hit and destroy Russian forces hiding within the buildings around the coastline. We can even see that they've deployed Baba Yagas from these boat drones, and they're then flying them deeper into Crimea to strike and destroy Russian forces. You can also see them here showing off some stills of the vessels while they're close to the Ukrainian forces and close to shore. And we can also see those boats at a distance here as well, and showing the fires that have been caused by their prior strikes near to the area of Crimea. But that's the 40th Marine Brigade's footage of their strikes that are continuing against the Russian forces that are still in Crimea. And with the situation that we're watching right now, I would assume that they're probably not going to be there for that much longer. Speaking of strikes against the Russian Federation, we have to move into one that is unprecedented in scale, and it appears to be even larger and more devastating than the Tuamse oil depot attack that we saw about a couple of weeks, if not a month and a half ago at this point. Many of y'all will know that last night we covered the attack on the city of Rubinsk and the oil depot that exists within the southeastern area of the city. As of today, this oil fire has gotten completely out of control. It already looked to be getting out of control yesterday. Today we can confirm that it is what can only be described as an unmitigated disaster for the Russian Federation in more ways than one. Ukrainian drones have been slamming into this oil depot not only over the course of last night, but all the way through the course of today, with intermittent drone strikes happening in the midst of the raging inferno that has now enveloped most of this facility. Starting off with some of our first clips here to show you what's been going on around the depot itself. This first clip is actually filmed from the local area of Rybinsk, near to some Khrushchevka, as they watch the major oil fire burning just about a mile and a half away at the oil depot on the other side of the city. Here's that clip.
Jeez. That's wild when these depots catch on fire. They create their own entire cloud system up there, like literally creates massive, like huge clouds of just purely oil that's going to rain down from the skies.
It's absolutely crazy. And also later on in the day, like a couple of, let's say probably about 10 hours ago at this point, we also got to see that more Ukrainian drones came in. Not a large amount of them like the first attack, but a couple of them at a time, one or two over the course of the day, that also came in and had their own kick at the Rubinsk oil depot. This one right here was apparently seen about 8 to 10 hours after the original attacks that sent the facility on fire, and this clip shows it coming on in and also slamming into the facility as well. And there it is, making its dive right on in, and then slamming into the depot, only adding fuel to the fire, literally. Unbelievable kind of stuff. Additionally, we also were able to see more footage of the smoke billowing out of the facility, this time from afar. We don't even know where this is. It actually appears to be to the southwind side of the fire, which we believe was filmed probably somewhere along the P151 highway near Ovcharybrisky or Panfilovo, meaning that they probably were about 5 miles to 6 miles away from the oil fire at the time that they filmed this. Here's the clip showing the fire from this angle. And we'll actually be muting that because that's music. But we can see the oil fire rising here from miles away. At this point, it has enveloped the entirety of the facility, and the oil smoke is now turning into an actual cloud layer at high altitude and then traveling over a great distance towards the southeast from the oil depot. As of the moment right now, we have confirmed that the oil smoke has made it to Yaroslavl, and based off of the size of this fire and the fact that the similar size to Tuamse fire reached all the way over to the city of Astrakhan over here in the Russian Volga Delta region, which was over about 350 miles away, we would easily assume at this moment right now that that if this fire at Rubinsk that has originated from this oil depot has been able to reach all the way to Yaroslavl, it's mostly going to be reaching about 350 miles as well from its origin point heading towards the southeast, meaning that the next following cities will most likely be in the path, and Yaroslavl has already been confirmed to be in the path of the oil smoke column that's now billowing and then floating over the rest of southeastern Russia, including Yaroslavl, Nizhny Novgorod, and also a couple of other smaller cities, including Pavlovka, Arzamas, Lukyanavo, and also Kovrov, which are several cities to mention, which now appear to be in the path of this giant smoke plume billowing from the facility. We actually were able to see a couple of other clips as well of the oil tanks on fire here briefly as this person was walking their dog. They walked up to a river that is now quite literally covered in oil.
Man, that is bad right there. The whole top of the water is covered in stuff right there.
It's just seeping with the stuff. It's unbelievable. They're actually about to stick their finger in it to show y'all what it is. It is straight up oil from the tanks. We see it coating the grass that's in the near shore area. And right here, they dip their finger in and then show it. It is straight up oil on the surface.
Man, that's really bad right there. Also, can you like turn that lady down moaning right there? But also, by the way, it's like, you know, putting your hands in that. Also, can you imagine the birds and stuff landing on top of that? They're probably going to get covered in it like that oil spill down the Gulf.
Honestly, they probably will. We also got to see this clip coming from Yaroslavl. All the way down in Yaroslavl, it was already starting to rain literal oil from the skies above. You can actually see all of the oil collecting in the corners of these floor tiles here on the outside area of someone's house in the city of Yaroslavl.
Сегодня первый раз такое вижу. Воскресенье 14 число идет черный дождь. Просто реально черный. Вот сейчас покажу, что капает с крыши. Кот у меня весь черный пришел. Вот идут капли.
Is it possible that the oil clouds themselves would actually cause like rain to come down? Like, can it create its own precipitation? I'm obviously not a meteorologist, so I wouldn't know. But does anybody happen to know that in the chat? Because it seems weird to me that immediately after those massive clouds of oil started puffing into the sky like that, immediately after that, then the rain starts happening, which has oil literally saturated in the rain. It seems like it almost caused it.
Let me see here. Actually, yes, oil smoke from oil fires like this can actually create an element called black rain or oil-laden rain, where it just gathers up some water condensation in the air as it's traveling. The water clings to the oil smoke, and then it later creates rainstorms throughout the area of the oil cloud, which then return the oil, along with the water, back down to the earth in what we're seeing right here, which is this black rain.
Damn, so it can create its own rain. That's wild right there. I was wondering if that was the case because in Tuapse, which was the other site of an oil disaster, just like this one right here that we're seeing in Rubinsk, the exact same thing happened there. These massive clouds of oil started going in all over the skies and filling the skies. And then almost, I think it was like less than 24 hours later, the rain started pouring like a monsoon nonstop. And then the streets started having oil running all down the streets of the city of Tuapse. So we're seeing the same thing here in Rubinsk, and it looks like, honestly, I'll say this looks like a higher concentration of oil in the rain. I mean, that dude literally just wiped his hand along the roof and literally has a handful of oil.
Oh, no, he didn't wipe his hand along the roof. He held his hand below the roof. That's from the water droplets coming off of the roof. He didn't even touch it.
Same thing. He got some oil off the roof. He wiped his hand. He got some oil off the roof, whatever he did. He got oil off the roof. That's a hell of a lot of it right there just to, like, wipe your hand and get that.
Oh, you see the oil forming right there.
Просто черная.
Honestly, folks, I don't mean to like completely sidetrack this whole conversation here on the oil, but for like modeling and weathering and stuff, for like model trains or model tanks and stuff, I mean, that's actually like a pretty nice India ink wash right there. You could actually like put a paintbrush in that stuff and start weathering up like a model if you wanted to make it look a little bit more old and worn out with that stuff. It literally looks like India ink wash that you use in modeling.
Вот оно. Это трындец. И вот такая вот.
And there's some more of the stuff down there.
That seems like once that gets on the ground, that's going to seep right into their water supply. It seems like it's going to have so many different impacts, like, you know, seeping into drinking water, you know, obviously getting into crops. If they're growing any crops in the area, it's going to start probably polluting the hell out of that. That's literally a disaster right there. That's going to affect a lot of stuff.
Throughout the course of the day, while this disaster has been unfolding, we also saw more of the drones coming in this clip as well.
Bro, just totally ignored what I said.
Oh no, no, I'm just making sure to keep things rolling. Like, well, you see that clip right there showing another impact onto the facility. And meanwhile, further on south, to speak of that continued disaster around the area, because I had to get to that clip first before I got on into the next bit, we did get to see more pictures coming out of the town of Yaroslavl showing the impacts that have been seen downstream of the oil fire, just about 60 miles away in the next major city, which is Yaroslavl. This right here is apparently some sort of a rainwater collector outside of someone's house, and it has now been turned into just basically a tub of oil.
Yeah, that's very bad right there. I got to imagine, like I was saying, that's got to affect all the crops and stuff like that. It's got to. And it's like, how do you even go about remediating or fixing something like this? Once it starts seeping in the ground and getting all of your crops and also getting all over the wildlife too, it's like, how do you even go about fixing that? It's like that you're going to have to start a massive operation to go out and I'm not even really sure how they would fix it, to be honest. I'm sure Putin's not equipped to do that. So certainly not. They're broke.
And I don't think they will. We also got to see here that this bucket that was just sitting outside that collected some of the falling black rain has now also turned into just a bucket of pure oil. We also saw another picture here showing what appears to be a bathtub that's outside for some reason, having collected a thick film of oil. You can actually see the kind of bubbles that you would see in literal oil in the storage tanks in that as well. I mean, that seems to be high quality oil right there, literally falling from the sky, almost no water content in it whatsoever. And we also were able to see that this one pan, honestly, man, that looks like a sieve for like gold sifting, you know, like when you go to the river and stuff, like that looks like that.
Yeah, it looks like something off that Gold Rush show on the Discovery Channel. It looks like that, the way they're panning out gold and stuff. This is just horrible, like really, really bad.
It is really, really bad. We can also see this greenhouse here. The water that came down from the rain literally coating the entirety of the roof, this thick black color. And you can also see the black streaks of the condensate going down the side of the greenhouse as well, once again streaking it in that black oil film. And also the plants as well are, of course, being covered with it, which clearly, as we all know, oil is not really something that's conducive to plant life, so it's probably going to be killing off a good amount of it. And we also saw more of the oil contamination in this last picture as well, showing how much oil is now in the black rain that's falling in from the sky above over the city of Yaroslavl. This incident can only be described as probably one of the worst that we've seen so far in the Russian Federation. And of these sorts of disasters, we've seen three. The first one was in the port of Tuapse. The second one, I believe, I'm trying to think of where that one was. Where in the world was the second one, Matthew? Do you remember? Because I'm not really remembering off the top of my head.
There was two ops. There's this one here in Rabinsk that just happened, but the one in between it though, was it the one up there near St. Petersburg at that oil depot that they hit? Was it near that area, or am I mistaken?
No, I think it was back behind Moscow, because I remember saying that it created a line kind of on up the Volga, but I think it came from the south and it was blown northwards that time. But I forgot where that was from.
I know which one you're talking about. It's just sadly I can't remember exactly which place it happened in. Two ops overshadowed that one a lot, so I kind of just put that one to the wayside, the one you're talking about. But there was one in between there that happened between two ops and the Rabinsk one we're watching.
It's in one of these cities around here somewhere, like Samara, I believe. I'm trying to make sure to find it here really quickly, because I want to make sure that we can give you all the full story here instead of just going, it was big, and then moving us right on and into the next story. It was in one of these cities down here to the south. I remember this vividly because we zoomed in on it, we found it on air and geolocated it, and it was a big oil tank farm near to a oil refinery somewhere within this region that had been hit and was on fire. And I'm trying to remember vividly. I remember vividly what it looked like. And I mean, Richard Manieren said Perm. Was it Perm? Let me go find Perm here really quickly. I'm pretty sure you're right, actually, with Perm. So let's see here. The city of Perm. I'm going to have to type that in. Sadly, I'm not able to see that here really quickly on the map. Perm. Wait a minute. Yeah, you're on the money, actually. Yeah, it was actually these oil tanks right here that were hit. Thank you, Richard Manieren, for pointing that out. Actually, you just reminded me of that strike. This was the one that was hit as the second strike after Tuapse, which created a similar incident to the one we're watching right now. And that oil plume then drifted on up basically north along the Volga, actually the Ural mountain ranges into the hinterlands of western Russia up here in the east. So that actually is the second strike, and now we're seeing the third strike of its type at Rabinsk. And and we're now seeing that the same oil smoke plumes are being created, but this time I'd actually say that these are as large as Tuapse, which was the largest attack of its type, or possibly even larger. One thing's for sure, though, this is an absolute disaster that is now unfolding for the Russian Federation. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so it looks like about 66% of the audience said this seems to be a lot worse than the Tuapse disaster that we saw a short while back that happened in the Russian city of Tuapse when Ukraine struck another oil depot there. 15% said Russia will get this under control somehow, which I'm not even really sure how they will, but 15% believes they'll get it under control, and 12% said I'm 50-50 on this one. And I really legitimately do not know how Russia's going to fix this, because I see a couple people in the chat saying it. Once this oil starts like seeping into the ground and getting in your water tables and getting all over the crops, and like we were mentioning earlier, once that starts happening, it's virtually impossible to remediate that. It's going to contaminate everything, and that's the end of it. So I don't really know. Like, I guess maybe the Russians could try to get some shovels out there and maybe shovel some of the oil off the top of the water that washes up on the shore of these rivers and lakes and stuff like that. They could try to do that, but I think once something like this happens, it's pretty much a lost cause. All they can do is stop the fire at the actual oil depot, and then everything else that happens beyond that is kind of just a wash at that point. So I don't think there is a fix. That's why, unfortunately, obviously it's not good to see stuff like this happening, because it is an ecological disaster. It's going to affect literally everything, including civilians. But at the same time, though, these oil depots are being used for war, and this is how nasty war can get right here. But that's why war's not good. But I would say I'm with the 66%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say I'm with the 66%. This is a really bad one, especially considering that most of the plume actually largely floats down towards the area of the Volga River. There's a high chance of contamination of the whole of the Volga River as a result. The oil slick that's created on the surface can suffocate fish and also kill a large amount of birds that also live around the Volga area as well, which could have a detrimental effect on the surrounding environments and also lead to significant issues, say with parasitic sorts of animals like locust swarms and whatnot, which could start to devastate Russian crop rotations and Russian crop yields over this year, which may already be in a very perilous state, considering that a large amount of farms are having to slow down their purchases of, for example, fertilizers, and also slow down their purchases and upkeep of their agricultural machinery. For that reason, I would say that this is a pretty bad disaster, all things considered. But unfortunately, this is war, and at the end of the day, the Russian Federation did have a choice at the beginning of the war to not hit similar targets like these in Ukraine, and yet since the beginning of the war, they have done that for 4 years and 4 months. And so now the Ukrainians have been returning the favor to the Russians now and bringing the war back home to them. So, in a sense, this is what happens. One who lives by the sword dies by the sword, as the saying goes. And if you attack oil depots in Ukraine, and you attack any critical infrastructure such as that throughout the entirety of the state of Ukraine, the Ukrainians are going to be attacking similar in the Russian Federation. And that's why you generally try and have some form of reservations in war and keep it to things that are only vital or absolutely necessary, lest these sorts of things come back to the one who originally sowed these eggs at the beginning of the war. In the meantime, the Russian Federation is trying to get back at the Ukrainians for the Rybinsk oil fire, which did start in the middle of our show last night, by conducting major drone and missile attacks against the entirety of the Ukrainian state over the course of this day, and really during the show live on air right now. Footage just came out 49 minutes ago, pretty much when we went live on air, actually showing more of the air defense actions over the city of Kyiv that are being conducted in the midst of this ongoing attack. Here's a clip here actually showing a Patriot interceptor attempting to shoot down a Russian missile.
Oh!
We hear the explosions in the nearby area in the city. And we also see what appears to be a stricken Russian missile slamming into the ground below.
Awful right there. I think they've said so far it's been dozens of missiles that Russia's fired into Kyiv, Ukraine, and also, as you can tell, they're firing them right in the middle of the city. So that's obviously not on the outskirts. That's right into the middle of it. I think they've fired so far like 30-something large missiles at the capital. Which obviously, I mean, how the hell are you going to justify that as a military strike? You can't. It's like civilians are all over Kyiv. You can't discriminate between civilians and the military.
And it is something else, like, to see these kinds of strikes and how indiscriminate they are against the city of Kyiv. And here's another clip, a bit of a lengthier one, showing those kinds of strikes in an even longer form, and also showing more of them that have been happening against the city just about an hour before we went live on air.
Я вот там отснял, что туда полетел, блядь. Ебать. Ебать, типа, обратно, ну и нахуй, блядь. Ты шо?
We hear the missiles continuing to impact outside, but it appears that now silence has reached the city, and as soon as I said that, another explosion rocked the area.
Тупо пиздец.
Awful, man. It looks like a decent amount of missiles are getting through. Which also, the last time we had heard a statement from the Ukrainian officials, they were I think they wrote an open letter to the United States asking for more Patriot missile interceptors, which is their air defense system that they primarily use inside the capital of Kyiv. They were saying they were low on interceptors, and it looks like that shortage might be showing up here in this attack because it looks like a lot of stuff's getting through.
It certainly does appear that there is a shortage of air defense interceptors over Kyiv, and this is starting to lead to a decrease in efficiency of the Ukrainian air defense forces in successfully shooting down incoming cruise missiles and ballistic missiles that are fired at Kyiv and other major cities throughout Ukraine. The Ukrainians do have an incredibly high effective rate and interception rate against Russian drones. They have a very well-designed and indigenously produced drone defense force that is able to deal with those sorts of threats easily. However, for most of the large caliber threats like the Iskanders, the Calibers, and so on, that still requires Western provided and most of the time American provided Patriot air defense interceptors to be able to deal with and shoot down these incoming ballistic and cruise missiles. And we are starting to note that their air defense capabilities over Kyiv are being greatly diminished, and these are starting to pose an Achilles heel to the city as they don't really have any air defenses in large numbers to speak of to be able to deal with these sorts of incoming threats. This is also why the Ukrainians are racing to create their own indigenously produced and built version of a Patriot or a SAMP-T air defense system, so that way they can make sure to have their own missiles and their own air defenses available that aren't counting on foreign support to keep them running, which in the US's instance can be incredibly questionable. We also were able to see that today there has been an unfortunate casualty as a result of these attacks within the city of Kyiv. One of the monasteries, I believe this is actually called the Kyiv Pechursk Lavra, which is a 1,000-year-old monastery in the city of Kyiv, has actually taken a direct hit from what we can tell by a Russian missile and appears to be burning profusely. We believe that most of the interior of the structure has been destroyed, and many of y'all will know this monastery because it is one of the key symbols and one of the main photo ops that the state of Ukraine has to be able to market their nation and their capital city. This is one of the oldest monasteries of its type in the whole of Eastern Europe. This thing is over 1,000 years old. It's older than most modern nation states are that are in existence right now. And from what we understand, it's the central building here with most of the domes, the golden domes on it, that appears to have taken the direct hit and most of the damage. This is also what the interior of the building looks like that's currently burning through at this moment right now. And here's another picture showing the extent of the fire and the damage that's been caused.
Absolutely awful with that right there. Also, I think this was a UNESCO heritage site too, so a very important spot here. Like you said, iconic inside of Kyiv. It's like also, by the way, for all the Russian supporters out there that want to say, "Oh, Russia stands for like traditional Christian values," then how do you explain something like this? It's like Russia sent a missile into a cathedral or like a monastery. It's like, how do you explain that? I'm like, that doesn't seem very Christian-like. If that's the narrative they're running with, like, why hit a monastery?
Really, why hit it? It doesn't make any sense at all. And also, on top of that, this is a clear violation of the Geneva Convention, as religious sites are completely off of the board of being hit generally whatsoever for the most part, unless we can prove that they're being occupied and operated by military forces, which this monastery clearly was not. We also were able to see an additional bit of information as well on the monastery and the fire, as this clip here, taken very close nearby, also shows the ongoing blaze at the monastery. We hear the crackling of some sort of a timber most likely giving way in the building during that clip right there at the end. it's incredibly unfortunate to see that such a historic and influential sort of a site has been hit and destroyed, most likely by the Russian Federation. To also bring this into mind for many people, considering that the structure is nearly 1,000 years old, and well, actually these buildings here were actually built around the 16 and 1700s, if I'm being completely honest, but the site of the monastery itself and some of its oldest structures are 1,000 years old. It is very unfortunate to see such a thing, because this is not only a cultural and historic site for Ukraine, but it's more so a cultural and historic site for the entirety of Eastern Europe. At the time that this monastery was originally brought into being, it was a part of the I believe it was called the Kievan Rus, which were the original people which created Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, basically the heart of most Slavic cultures within this region of Eastern Europe. And this was basically the epicenter of Christendom within this region of Eastern Europe, and it has a significant amount of cultural influence and historic significance, considering that Eastern Orthodoxy became a defining element of most of the politics, the foreign policy, and the internal politics of most of the countries that have existed, lived, and died within this region over the past 1,000 years. And the fact that the Russian Federation would go out of their way to destroy what is basically a regional heritage site for the entirety of Eastern Europe, just out of pure spite alone, is an absolutely heinous act to see, and something of the highest order of destruction I could ever think of.
You know, the really ominous part about this, the last time this site right here was struck, according to what I know about from my history, the last people that struck this was the Nazi Germans, actually. And Enforcer, can you confirm that for me? And I want to make sure my history is accurate. I believe it was the Dormiton or Dormitian Cathedral at this site right here was struck by the Nazi Germans, I believe.
Let me see here. I'm trying to see if I can find that here really quickly. And let's see. The 11th. Yeah, so it was destroyed at the opening of Operation Barbarossa. Oh, actually, kind of near to the opening of Operation Barbarossa in November of 1941. So there actually was a building nearby called the, it was the 11th century Dormitian Cathedral. That was actually one of the original standing structures that was 1,000 years old, that was destroyed by the Germans back in 1941. The rest of the structures outside the foundations of that building, which is all that is left of it, have been standing ever since the 1600s, meaning that the building that was hit right now is about a 450-year-old building that has been hit and is now burning while we're on air.
Yeah, it's a little ominous, isn't it? It's like the last time this has been struck was way back when the Nazi Germans were going through here and hitting stuff and doing what they were doing. And now the next person to hit it is Vladimir Putin, who many people believe is the modern day Hitler to a large degree. So a little bit interesting with that Russia constantly says, oh, there's like all kinds of like unsavory people in the Ukrainian government. But the only people I see matching up to the atrocities that the Nazi Germans committed is the Russian regime that Putin's in charge of.
Man, honestly, it is something else to see. Honestly, folks, I hate this kind of stuff. I'm a humongous person for history, and I've advocated here on the channel of not directly hitting the Kremlin in Moscow because it has a significant amount of historical and cultural significance there as well. But with the Russians conducting attacks like these, it becomes a much harder argument to say that historic sites in the Russian Federation should be protected as well, as that would generally be a bit of miss. The rules of war only exist as long as both sides follow them. For example, if the Russians start executing Ukrainian prisoners of war en masse, the Ukrainians have absolutely no obligation to be able to see that the prisoners of war that they currently have in their hands from the Russian Federation continue to remain alive and well. That's generally how it's been understood and operated as far as the Geneva Convention has been concerned, ever since its inception in the 1860s. So we'll most likely see, possibly, I doubt it, that the Ukrainians might return this strike in form with its own strikes on significant Russian cultural sites inside the Russian Federation. But that's yet to be seen, and we don't really know if they'd be willing to follow through with that. And also, we'll have to see what the actual extent of the damage is to this monastery. Usually fires like these, however, can cause a large amount of damage, usually to the vaulting and the ceilings, and also to the structure at large. Many of y'all will actually remember and will be reminded of the Notre Dame fire that occurred in Paris back in 2020, which burned the entire roof structure of the Notre Dame away after what appeared to be some sort of a workplace incident where sparks from ongoing restoration work landed on some sort of dry wood and then created a fire, or some sort of shavings that were on the scaffolding, which then created a fire and destroyed the larger part of the roof. Well, actually the entirety of the roof. And this actually led to the Notre Dame's structure almost collapsing, because the building's structural integrity relies on what's called the flying buttress and vault design. The flying buttress and vaults are actually what allows for the Notre Dame to remain standing with the tall, thin stone walls that it has. If the vaults or the flying buttresses fail, the vaults can either push outwards, making the walls collapse outwards towards the outer sides of the cathedral, and if the vaults fail, the flying buttresses can actually push the walls inwards and make the cathedral collapse towards its inside, which can lead to a cascading domino effect and lead to the complete destruction of the building. Fortunately, the monastery in Kyiv is not designed as the Western European cathedrals are, where that sort of fault point exists within the flying buttress and vault design. However, there is still a significant risk that there could be a lapse of structural integrity here at this monastery due to its own unique structural design, and it could lead to the collapse of one of the dome towers, which could then lead to a chain effect throughout the building, which may lead to the collapse of most, if not all, of the domes or the structural walls on the surrounding sides of the building, and obviously the interior. So hopefully we'll be able to see the Ukrainian firefighters are able to manage the situation well, and we're also able to see the recovery efforts are managed well, because it is possible that the remaining parts of the unburned structure could be salvaged and saved, and restoration work could be done in the post-war era to be able to refurbish the destroyed elements of the monastery that we're seeing burning right now. So hopefully that'll be the case. But moving us on out of Kyiv and the ongoing attacks against the city, which have, of course, created very unfortunate news, we've also been able to hear of other interesting developments throughout the rest of the world. And actually, to bring y'all to something here that's a little bit outside of the situation in Russia, we're about to be going to the English Channel. But before we get to that, I actually see that we have a poll running on something that is pretty important right now. And I want to make sure that we get back into Moscow here really quickly to cover these important points before we go out to the English Channel. Inside of Moscow today, rumblings have started to appear even within the Russian State Duma that Putin is an ineffective leader at the best case scenario. According to a Russian member of parliament, which is a member of the Duma, he has demanded that Vladimir Putin deliver a plan to end the war, and he has berated that the Kremlin's ineffective leadership is leading to significant issues inside of the Russian Federation. We could also see that the Telegraph then linked the article that Vyacheslav Markiev, which is the member of the Duma, stated about why he is saying that the Kremlin has been ineffective, which is largely Vladimir Putin. And we're now seeing that even members of the Duma, which are largely a rubber stamp parliament, are beginning to state that they believe that there is really no confidence in Putin continuing the war, and the war must end by some means, somehow, at some point in the future. We've also seen that it appears that the risk, or at least Putin's belief of the risk of coup, is continuing to rise, as we've now been able to hear that this time the Russians have purged a military commissar who was found dead under the windows of a high-rise building in the city of Rostov on Don. This didn't happen in Moscow, but it's a part of the larger Moscow story over the day, as it is showing continued purges. According to the information that we got, and I'm going to read it word for word, the military commissar left a note and died in Rostov. Oleg Sokolenko was the head of the military commissioner's office in the Pervomaisky and Proletarsky districts of Rostov-on-Don. His body was found near a multi-story building, and a letter he left behind was later found in his apartment. Revealing that it was his decision, he said goodbye to his family and asked that no one be blamed for what happened. Pretty interesting to add that one in.
Yeah, he just happened to leave a note behind and said, out of everything that I could have written in this note, I just want to make sure that you don't blame the Russian FSB for doing this, by the way. I just want to make sure that nobody blames the Russian government for this, but he just happened to fall and trip out of a 10-story window or something. It's like, that sounds a little bit strange.
Man, there's it's such a heroic man. His life is good. He's in a high position of the Russian military, getting paid well, I would assume. He's got a wife and kids, a family to look forward to. Everything's fine. Now it's time to jump out of a window. And also, let me make sure to write down on the note specifically that nobody is responsible whatsoever for this. Literally nobody can be found culpable or even responsible for anything that happened here. This is entirely my doing. I'm living a perfect life, but it's just time to go.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird. I have a little bit of insight into the situation. Unfortunately, I put it in the likes tab right now if people want to see how this kind of went down, or at least allegedly how people believe it went down. This is generally how it kind of went right here, as you can see. Apparently, this was the Russians right here explaining to the poor sap, the general, of how he would accidentally fall out of that 10-story window, and they were just telling him that it was just business. They said it was nothing personal, but you would have to trip out of the window. So apparently, that's how it went.
Honestly, On God, no cap. Like, that's it. That's how that went. Like, that's definitely how it went. And also, you notice something, folks, that's also interesting about this article from the Rostov on Don news is that they said that he was found at the bottom of his apartment building, right outside of the windows of his apartment. No joke, the guy literally, quote unquote, fell out of the window. We've seen the Russians kill so many people by throwing them out windows. This clearly is a guy that got flung out of the window. And that's why the note's a fabrication. I bet you the note doesn't even exist for the larger part, and it was just added on to make sure that clearly there's no culpability for the FSB or the Russian government. But on the website of the military commissariat of the Rostov region, the position head of the Proletarsky and Pervomaisky districts is now listed as vacant, and they're open for hires. In April, Dmitry Beletsevets, former military commissar of the Proletarsky and Pervomaisky districts of Rostov, was sentenced to 9 years in a special prison for bribery. That's a little interesting as well. You know, that's a little extra nugget of information right there. The last guy before this one was put in prison for 9 years for bribery in April, and then this guy gets taken out in June? Huh.
I think this guy right here was also accused of bribery, from what I had heard.
Well, you know what's a little interesting about that is that all these guys are being accused of bribery and corruption at the main supply hub that supplies all of the Russian armed forces in Ukraine. That's a little interesting, don't you think? Like, that's a pretty important spot to kind of be in, to be at the military commissariat of one of the districts in the Rostov Oblast, which handles almost all of the supply volumes that went to the land bridge area in the Donbass in this current part of the war. That's a little odd that everybody who would be kind of involved in that, the current guy and former guys, would all end up going to prison or dying within the past few months in this current situation right now. Maybe it's because, in reality, all of them were starting to realize that the supply situation is becoming unbearable because they're literally at the export point, if we want to call it that, for all the supplies going into Ukraine, and maybe they started to think that because they were seeing how badly it was going, they were maybe whispering around in some places in Rostov or the MOD, saying that things actually were going quite badly down there, and they offed them, so that way they couldn't keep going around and talking about how poor the situation is, possibly.
That could be it, maybe so. It's sort of weird to me that how all these guys in these positions can be accused of bribery, but yet the entire Russian government is literally founded on bribery. Like, the whole thing is corrupt. It's literally designed to be that way. Everybody just kind of understands the way it works there is it's pure corruption. So it's like, how are they going to start, like, singling people out for that when the whole system is that way?
Honestly, it's a good question. And the answer is that the corruption only works for the guys that are in with the in-group. Like, if you're not in the in-group, it's not going to work much longer for you. Basically like the Mafia, you know? Like, you can do whatever the hell you want in the Mafia as long as you don't step on the wrong toes. But if you step on the wrong toes, then everything you've done and the sins you've bared for your whole life are going to be coming crashing at you all in 1 second. We also were able to see that in the midst of this, Putin had to do a little propaganda round today. He had to go out and bless the upcoming soldiers for death. During a meeting with the soldier troops, Putin said, "Are you advancing towards Zaporizhzhia?" The one soldier said, "Yes, sir." And then Putin said, "Well, good luck." And that was it. So, like, here's the clip.
Победа будет за нами, враг будет разбит.
Спасибо большое. Сомнений какие. А это что? Это чей, ребят?
С этим шевроном нашего батальона мы в прошлом году взяли населенные пункты Каменская и Степовое Запорожской области. И считаем, что это наш небольшой подарок вам. И новые победы, соответственно,
Спасибо
они
большое.
тоже будут во имя России.
Это у вас группа
This is
Днепр.
the Dnipro
точно.
group.
Постепенно подбираетесь к Запорожью.
Так точно.
Удачи вам.
Победа будет.
Good luck.
I'm surprised they even had soldiers to bring back to even do this little, like, goofy ceremony they're doing right here. Because, you know, most of the soldiers die in the first 2 weeks. I'm surprised they scrapped enough together to even have this.
Well, you know a lot about Soviet propaganda?
A little bit, but what part about it?
Well, these guys were probably never there. Like, that's the thing about Russian and Soviet propaganda, is that these guys probably never were in Zaporizhzhia. The reality is that they're probably from some sort of a unit from somewhere in the rear line area that never went to the front, and they decided, we just need to make some heroes. And they came up with these guys to turn them into heroes. They probably didn't see frontline action in reality, and that's generally how it was done in the Soviet Union back in the day, is that they would go, damn, we need a hero. This is probably one of the most interesting sorts of things that ever existed in the Soviet Union, is the story of the Fiery Ram. And I don't know the name of the actual pilot off the top of my head from the story of the Fiery Ram, but at the beginning of the Second World War, for the Soviet Union that is, during Operation Barbarossa, the Soviet Union came up with a story that this one pilot, and you'll probably find this really interesting, man, because it's an insane story. This one pilot, he was trying to blow up some Germans that were advancing down a highway near to, I believe it was Babrusk or Baranichi, in somewhere in Belarus. And the Germans started firing in his aircraft, and they lit it up. The engines caught on fire, the fuel tanks were burning, the gunner in the backseat was dead, and the pilot was bleeding out and dying. But he was a hero. He was a hero of the Soviet Union. So he dove the plane downwards and kamikazed it, and as the story goes, into the advancing German convoy that was going down the highway, and wiped out dozens of them. He took out a tank. He took out a couple of supply trucks. He took out dozens of troops. He was a hero of the Soviet Union. He was given an award posthumously for his bravery. The problem is that the whole story is a lie. And in the 1990s, that was found out. During the 1990s, when the Soviet Union collapsed, all the records vaults that are now sealed currently were wide open because there was no government around at the time to keep people from the West from sleuthing around. And so they went and looked at the story of the fiery ram, and there was no military report that spoke of the fiery ram on that day of action from the air wing this guy was supposedly from. When they went and looked at the highway where the fiery ram incident happened, there wasn't even an airplane crash near the highway. No remnants of an airplane near the highway. No remnants of bodies or graves near the highway. There was no report from the German side, from the very little documents that existed, of a fiery ram ever occurring on that highway, on that convoy at that time. The whole story was made up. The pilot wasn't even the guy who did it. They said if anyone had done it, it probably was a whole other pilot. But that story lived, and actually it was Costello. Chromium, you got it right. It was Costello. That was the pilot that they alleged did this. But that didn't stop that story from being circulated through the largest newspaper in the Soviet Union. And through the war, hundreds of Soviet pilots would actually sacrifice their lives in the fiery ram. And yet the original story that came from, that never even happened. It was all a lie. And I'd honestly believe that at this point, with how badly Zaporizhzhia is going, these guys probably were never on the front. If anything, they were probably in a rear line unit, or they weren't even in a unit that went to Zaporizhzhia. They're just being put here for the cameras.
Yeah, it seems like it could be likely, possibly right there. So yeah, these might not be the guys.
These might not even be the guys at all. But outside of that, though, with this little propaganda story that we've seen right here in Moscow and all of the other developments that are now happening down in the Rostov Oblast and the Rostov, or the Southern Military District, and also with the rumblings in the State Duma by some officials, it appears that a lot of people right now are talking about the civil unrest that now appears to be forming inside of Russia against Putin himself. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so the mere fact that any Russian lawmaker dared to speak out whatsoever is remarkable in its own right. And I think this might be the first Russian member of parliament that has actually spoken out for the most part. They're now demanding that Putin explain how he plans to end the war, and they're also calling him ineffective, which, by the way, a very brave individual to say that, because the Russian parliament members are not somehow exempt from, Putin's wrath. So a very brave individual to say the least, or maybe just a really fed up one. But 44% said an uprising is forming on Putin, and that's why that guy felt so emboldened to say that. 36% said that guy will be dealt with, and that'll be the end of it. Putin will deal with him. 15% said it's only a few brave people speaking out. And I would say for that MP to feel so emboldened to come out and say something like that, he is not ignorant to how it works. If he's made it up to the ranks of a parliament member inside of Russia or a lawmaker, he knows how that system works because he's been in it his entire life. So in my opinion, I think there must be a lot more people in the parliament and in the legislature of Russia that feels the exact same way. And this guy was simply the bravest one to come out and say it first, because he would not come out and say that unless he knew he had people backing him up in the background. So he must know that he has allies in the parliament, or at least Russia's version of parliament. So that's why he's saying that. So he's asking for a plan to end the war. I don't even think Vladimir Putin knows how the war is going to end. He's just currently flailing right now and hoping that something works out. So I don't think he's going to get that explanation, but I do have a feeling, though, that all of a sudden you'll probably see charges come up against that guy right there. I'm sure Putin's gang and his cronies will come up with some charges to get rid of that guy and put him in a gulag somewhere. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that I think there is probably an uprising, or at least word of a possible coup attempt against Putin that is going to be conducted on him in the future. The fact that we're seeing this many open statements from the Russian public and now the Russian government as well, that they're displeased with Putin and they think that he needs to be removed or replaced, is giving us an idea that the sort of atmosphere for a coup is being formed in real time right now in Russia. Of course, this is going to largely require open student protests in the streets, and then the military joining in with the protests and attempting to overthrow Putin and his government. But the situation of instability that would lead to that sort of an incident happening is definitely here right now. This is basically the same kind of murmurings that existed in the very last years of the Soviet Union that led to the collapse of the Soviet system, and this is also the very same murmurings that we saw over 100 years ago in Russia during the end of the First World War, where we saw that the Bolsheviks would begin the Russian Civil War against the supporters of the Romanov dynasty and the Russian Empire. It seems to me to be very similar in those regards, and the fact that we've already had basically the modern equivalent of the 1905 Winter Revolution in the Yevgeny Prigozhin uprising of the Wagner Group in 2023, the groundwork's been set that the Russian government has been challenged, and while they were able to put down the threat, it was hardly at that, and someone else who might have a little bit more follow-through or a little bit more willpower might be able to put enough elbow grease in the situation to get the job done and overthrow Putin. And I think that's probably what a lot of people are starting to consider and think of inside of Russia, and especially within the central elements of the government in Moscow. So I hope I've addressed that incredibly well, along with Matthew. They're very interesting points, I would suppose. But before we move on into the rest of the news that we have for the night, out of the Tula region, out of the rest of Russia, Ukraine, and then the Middle East, we are going to be making sure to talk about that fundraiser, because that fundraiser's been going. And Matthew, where is it at right now, and who are the top donors of the fundraiser so far tonight?
All right, and also, by the way, was I just hearing things? How come I heard like a double echo? Did you hear that?
I was trying to refresh the live stream screen that I had to go see the fundraiser, because for some reason it wasn't playing for me.
Man, you gotta be careful doing that. I thought I was having a stroke. I was hearing double. I was hearing you talking or me talking or somebody else. I thought I was hearing ghosts. So I was like, "Where's this coming from?" But oh man, I was about to be like, "Help! Help!" But anyway, so right now the fundraiser is just shy of about $1,000 right now raised. Well, I'm trying to recover from that. I thought it was over, folks. Thought I was finished, but we're currently at $1,000 raised almost on the fundraiser. So we have a $2,500 goal tonight. I will say the fundraiser is not moving super fast tonight, but I know what's going on. A ton of people are currently watching that UFC fight on the White House lawn, and that's what's going on tonight. So we're missing a few of our normal people that usually support the fundraiser, but nonetheless, though, we are $1,000 into it right now, so it's doing pretty swell.
And that is incredibly good to hear. We love to see it, folks. We love to see it. Matthew, who are some of those top donors of this fundraiser tonight?
All right, so far we've had a 100 from none other than Hal Rose, as well as a 75 from Old Warrior Fella, a 50 from John Person, and a 50 from Rye Guy SR. And a huge shout out to all four of our top donors so far, and also a big shout out to everybody else who's thrown in a support below $50, because it's all of y'all that's helped us to get up to about $1,000 raised as of right now. So very nice to see. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to say, good googly moogly, folks. A huge thanks to all of the top donors for supporting the fundraiser tonight, and a huge thanks to everybody who's been supporting it over the course of the night as well, both the big donors and the small donors. Each and every single one of y'all have made it possible for this fundraiser to get to where it is right now, and hopefully we'll be able to see that it can hit that $2,500 goal. We're kind of getting close to halfway there. $1,250 is at the halfway point, and hopefully we'll be able to see that it makes it to the halfway point, and then well beyond, I hope. And so, a humongous thanks to everybody who's been supporting the fundraiser tonight once again, and with that in mind, we're going to be taking 3 questions from the chat, and then moving on into the rest of the news that we have from around the world. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right. So our first question here of the 3 right here is actually a super chat from none other than Ross from Australia. And thank you very much, Ross, for the $50 support, by the way. He said, if an MOU is drafted by the U.S. and Iran, but not signed off explicitly by both Israel and Hezbollah, how long before this whole house of cards fails once more, and we can't expect Israel to not defend itself against an existential threat from terrorists next door?
Thank you for the incredible support, Ross. And the reality is that as far as the House of Cards collapsing, it's going to collapse pretty quickly. But the thing is that it's not going to be collapsing with the U.S. in it. So the best way I can describe it is this is basically our modern equivalent of the Vietnam War. Because as many of y'all will know, the U.S. wasn't around when South Vietnam was defeated in 1975. We had left 2 years prior, in 1973, with the Paris Accords of 1972, and our withdrawal was completed by early 1973, which then left South Vietnam completely on their own against North Vietnam. And then when the offensives began in late 1974 and 1975, South Vietnam fell completely to the North Vietnamese, and that's why we have a unified occupied Vietnam today. That's pretty much what's going on right now in the Middle East, is that the United States appears to have just agreed, from what we can tell right now, to all of Iran's terms that they wanted, and there were basically no concessions to us whatsoever, and so that way we can exit the conflict, and if it restarts afterwards, it is going to restart. It's just going to be without us directly involved in it. So that appears to be the situation as we're seeing it right now, and that's why I would say it's not going to be lasting that much longer. It's going to collapse right after we end up negotiating some sort of a peace, and I would also assume that the Iranians are probably going to blockade the Hormuz at some point here in the very near future as well, which is something that didn't happen in Vietnam because they didn't have that sort of a position over any vital waterway. But we'll probably see the Iranians blockade the strait again not long after this agreement is put into stone, which appears to have been today, and then we'll just be left up the creek without a paddle for the larger part, and kind of screwed. And also screwed as far as our sphere of influence is concerned within the Middle East. So, not really a good position to be in.
Yeah, I would say definitely not. We'll get into this more later during our Iran segment, but really, though, if you look at it for what the situation is so far, the U.S. spent over $100 billion plus, most likely, according to estimates, going into the Iran war, and we came out of the war achieving literally zero objectives and simply negotiating the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz that was already open before the war began. So, I mean, what can you say about that? I mean, I don't even know what to say about that, to be honest with you. It's kind of a little bit, kind of pissing me off a little bit, but we'll leave that be, though. Honestly, I can get heated over that one. That's a interesting situation, to say the least, putting it very kindly.
Oh, it was only 13 U.S. soldiers dead and only a couple of hundred wounded and $100 billion wasted and a whole bunch of aircraft that were shot down and a whole bunch of drones and a whole bunch of guided missiles and bombs to achieve quite literally nothing and to give away something that we had at the beginning of the war, which was the Hormuz. So, hey, great negotiating. I mean, what one hell of a president right here. Got to say, folks, he's going to go down in history. That's for damn sure. I would say definitely not as the best in foreign policy. But with that, I have big thanks to you for support and help with the channel to keep them running, Ross, and I hope that does address that the best we possibly can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here, by the way, is going to go to JB Najalki. And thank you very much, JB Najalki, for that $5 support, by the way, if I can get your name out right there. But he said, will be my last super chat for a while as the cost of living is skyrocketing in Australia and will always be in the chat or lurking. And thanks for all you do. And LSA.
And a big thanks to you for support, JB Najalki, and I completely understand that. Prices are rising around the world right now, and so you have to make sure to take care of yourself, and that's a high priority. So a big thanks to you for support, but we will be looking forward to still seeing you on the stream every night, and we thank you so much for all the support that you've given so far to help us to keep this channel running and to keep making this thing possible. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that I've addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news from around the world.
All right, so this one is going to go to none other than Solus, who said, what is the chance that Ukraine pushes Russia into using a nuke as a last-ditch effort?
I would say probably unlikely. I don't really think the Russians are ever going to get a justification to use a tactical nuclear weapon on the state of Ukraine at any point during the conflict. They've come incredibly close to trying to use one, but I don't really think they'll ever be able to get away with using one, and that would also open up a Pandora's box that really won't be turning out all too well for the Russian Federation, or really the entirety of the world for that matter, because it'll be justifying multiple other nuclear-armed countries basically using nuclear weapons as a sword against non-nuclear nations to get their way, and then at that point it's a world of the survival of the fittest, and that becomes an extremely dangerous sort of a world to be in. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, and a big thanks to you once again for a great question there. And with that, it is time for us to move on and into the rest of the news that we have for the night, and we do have quite a significant amount of interesting news to cover. Moving us on over into the area of the English Channel, we did get to see and confirm today that for the first time ever, Royal Marine Commandos boarded the sanctioned Russian shadow tank fleet vessel, the Simurtos, in the English Channel, backed by the HMS Sutherland, the HMS Ledbury, and an RAF PA Poseidon. The vessel is now being held off the south coast of the UK as investigations continue, and this is the first UK-led operation of its type to be able to seize a Russian shadow tanker near to the British coast. Let's take a look at the footage that the Royal Marine Commandos put out of the seizure of the vessel. There is an NH-90 hovering over the deck.
I can't believe the British actually did this, to be honest with you, because it's been a while since that the British government came out and said they were going to start seizing these vessels, and it took them a while to get to it, but they're finally getting around to it.
And it really does look like it. It's really nice to see. Look at that. That's the Royal Marine Commandos right there, disembarking from some Chinooks.
They intercept your ship with regality.
In the name of His Majesty's government.
This is being seized for King Charles. This should go back to him, Governor.
Man, actually, folks, the reason why this vessel was seized, it wasn't for sanctions violations. There was a guy who actually got on his phone here near to the UK on Twitter, and he said, "Man, I hate those damn Ukrainian bastards. I hope they all rot." And then the British said, "That's slander and hate speech against His Majesty's people. God seize him." And they sent the Royal Marine Commandos out to go get the ship. We can also see another Chinook up near the bow unloading Royal Marines as well.
Listen to that chop from those rotors. That sounds very good on that Chinook.
And someone said that was a Merlin helicopter. Let me go pull that up. A Merlin helicopter. Are you right on that? Wow. Wow. I've never. Wow. Are you sure? Let me hold up. The 1 minute, 1 second. Are you sure? Because to me, it kind of looks more like an NH90, and I have to show the difference here because this is an important point to show. Let me see here. Is this used by the British? It is not. That's weird. Because that looks just like, that's like the profile and everything of an NH90. Let me show y'all. So that's the helicopter that we're looking at right there. And notice how right here, Matthew, it has like that significant flare upwards at the back of the passenger bay, if we want to call it that, to where it goes to the tail boom. Here on the NH90, you can see that pretty vividly right here. However, on the Merlins, it has a very beefy tail boom section to the helicopter, and that's why I was saying it was an NH90 at the start. I think earlier in the day I said it was an AS90, which is actually wrong. That's actually an SPG. I was trying to say NH90 on the video, but to me it looks like an NH90. It doesn't appear that it's publicly listed as used by the British, but at least the tail boom structure of the helicopter generally lines up a lot more, at least from what we're seeing from the side profile here, than the Merlin HM1s used by the British. I do see some people saying that it is definitely a Merlin. I don't know, folks. Like, the tail boom on that thing is just really thin for that. It looks to me like it probably, I wouldn't say it is. Maybe it's something different. Maybe it's not even an NH90 because it doesn't look like the British used those, but I'm not entirely sure that's a Merlin. But anyways, moving us on back to the minute mark of the video, we can also see the Chinooks coming in with another round of Royal Marine Commandos and also other British forces to bring on the ship.
Also, who's filming this? If that's the soldiers getting off the helicopter, who's filming this whole thing?
Well, this, Matthew, would be the film crews of His Majesty's Film Corps, which largely filmed the thing as a news shoot.
Man, honestly, they put the production crew on board. They're the real gangsters. They got on board the ship before the soldiers even did. The production crew did lights, camera, action, and had the whole thing waiting.
All right, so we just want y'all to come on the deck real nicely. At this point, they had already taken the bridge and everything else on the vessel, and so the rest of them that were coming in, they were filming it like they were just boarding the ship, interesting enough. And y'all will also see later on in the clip, this thing was heavily, I guess you could say, manufactured by the British for a good photo op, and y'all definitely hear that and see that later on.
Oi, Governor, do you have your TV license to view this content?
No.
We don't have a TV license. This is America.
In Britain, a TV license is the equivalent of paying for cable.
That's impressive they're able to hover that huge helicopter like that pretty stably. Light's barely bouncing around.
We hear them up on the bridge right now, too. And now we've got His Majesty's
Oh, no.
goons going through the ship's logs.
Man, this is very British right here. Let's make sure they got the license in order. It's like the first thing they do is start looking for the license immediately. That's very British right there. Forget like making sure all the crew is like gathered together in one spot. They are looking for the license off the bat.
Man, they said, let's look at the navigational charts in the captain's log. Man, they immediately went to the chart room and just started flipping through anything they could find. Apparently, these guys are with some sort of an enforcement agency of the British port authorities, the ones in black, and the guy back here in the kind of tannish colored uniform, he's the one with the Royal Marine Commandos, actually. So they brought in a whole other crew to look over the ship's logs and whatnot.
Excuse me, Mr. Mariner, did you post these nasty words on Facebook?
Excuse me, I saw that you said that you hate dolphins. Is this dolphinist or something? Are you trying to explain your crimes? See, they're from the NCA. Let me go pull that up. Let's see. NCA UK. Let's see. The National Crime Agency. So these guys are actually from a group called the National Crime Agency, and they brought them specifically onto the ship to look through the navigational charts, the logs, and everything else on the vessel. You see them still looking through it. Oddly enough, they censored it. We see them here making sure to get Royal Marine Commandos in the shot. You know, these are actually the same guys, I believe, along with the British police that show up to your door if you do make, like, a tweet that's against the law these days in the UK, actually. So kind of funny, they're literally using these guys to look through the ship. But now we're about to get to the fun part, the photo shoot.
Bro, what are they doing sweeping the room with a rifle? Why are they doing that?
You're about to hear why. I'm gonna play the clip like in its full thing. You're gonna bust out laughing at the end of this. Like, listen to it, it's crazy.
Yeah, hold that.
One for Charlie.
It's literally for the photo op. Like this whole thing
Bro.
afterwards. They've already secured the ship and everything. They're doing this whole part here for a photo op.
Man, he's literally brandishing this weapon at somebody's phone laying in the bed right there. Like, keeps like returning back to aiming at the phone. It's like, what? It didn't do anything. Like, what are we doing? Arresting phones now? Honestly, this has been silly. It's like you boarded a like commercial tanker ship. It's not like they're armed like bandits or something like that. I'm not sure about the whole sweeping the ship with a rifle type thing. It seems a little bit strange.
You see, that's actually an instrument of hate speech, a terrible weapon in His Majesty's kingdom. It gets even better. The next clip, they started off with the guy saying, okay, rolling. Like, you literally hear it in the clip, so here's the next part.
Rolling.
There it is! He literally says it at the beginning!
Oh my god, they didn't edit that out, man. They left it in. What the hell? They didn't even edit the video very well. Honestly, man, this is kind of a little bit cringy coming from the British. That's actually kind of rough.
Yeah, and watch, they're going to go through this whole, like, choreographed thing that they planned here. It's honestly kind of wild, folks, because usually you would want to kind of, like, edit this stuff out, but they left all of the stage instructions in the video. Like, you would think they'd edit it out, but they didn't. So now here they come, aiming at the cameraman. And now they're going to go through clearing the ship. Specifically for the camera. They already did this before.
Bro, this is over the top. This is too much.
Also, by the way, I mean, what does this say about the Royal Marine Commandos budget, considering that he's using, like, a first-gen EOTech with a big-ass, like, battery, like, attachment?
He's using the base model. Oh, yeah, I think that is the base model right there. Like, the higher-end model is, like, just that middle section without that massive rectangular, like, battery section added to it right there. But I'll say this, though. I'm obviously not a room clearing expert, but these dudes seem like they're a little unsure of what they're doing to be the commandos. Like, not trying to rat on them or something like that. They probably know what they're doing, but they're kind of a little distracted by the camera work going on or something. But this is kind of embarrassing. It's like over the top to the maximum. This does not require room sweeping like the ship like this by any means.
Yeah, it really doesn't. I mean, like I get that they're trying to show off that they have a standing like combat readiness and whatnot, but going through like a whole choreographed production to show it, and then leaving that all in the video so you can hear the stage instructions, really doesn't show that kind of confidence. It actually kind of does the opposite. It's more of a joke at this point. It's almost like a comedy skit, like from Monty Python. Okay, now that we've taken the ship, I didn't film any of it, so we need to go back through and film it all. Like, so let's all go back to the start from the top, and let's do it again. It's like, what's the point of that? I don't get it. This guy's doing like the action camera like flicks from one guy to the next.
All right,
now,
cut, guys. Time for a sandwich break. Cut.
They end the clip, though, on the most ominous part, Matthew. This is the climax for part 2. The unkempt bed. That is a serious crime.
Oh, yes. The pot of room clearing. The panty raid.
Man, I gotta say.
Man, I tell you what, the British out here wilding out on these commercial ships, man. I tell you what. I guess they're trying to get their TV time in, I guess.
I gotta say, folks, like I'm not going out of my way to diss on the British military. Like I actually think the British military is one of the best ones in the world outside the United States, and the British are a very large ally of the United States historically. But I do have to say, though, that the whole overproduction of this side of things, like getting on the bridge and filming the Royal Marines coming in like they're just coming on the ship and doing all of the stuff like it's just happening when it already happened outside of the camera. It's like, why in the world do that? Like, I don't really understand it. Like, I will say this, while CENTCOM lies out of their teeth these days, and there's no doubt about that, one thing I will give CENTCOM credit for is that when they do show published footage, it's footage of what's actually happening, not what they want to show happened when they reshoot it all for take 2. And that's one thing that I would have to say is not really that good with this whole thing. But outside of that, though, they did actually board the ship and seize it today, so that is something good in the larger sense. However, we do believe that this will be creating even increased escalations against the Russian Federation and the United Kingdom, which will most likely lead to an increased Russian naval presence around the United Kingdom as they try and escort these tankers through the area, and we'll most likely also see, additionally, that the British armed forces will probably get in further armed standoffs with the Russian Navy as a result. But right now, a lot of people are talking about what's going to be happening. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So what do you think Russia's going to do about this? Because Russia has been trying to bully the UK for quite a while. They'll send submarines off their coast. They'll send a whole bunch of these warships off their coast. And for whatever reason, Vladimir Putin really has it out for the leader of Britain right now, Starmer. He really has it out for him for some reason. I think there's some, I think he might detect weakness or something. And of course, a bully detects weakness, they're going to go for it. So I think that's what's going on here. But what do you think Russia is going to do now that their Shadow Fleet alleged tanker has been seized? 52% said Russia will largely ignore this act, while 26% said Russia will start more Navy escorts of these ships, and 16% said Russia is going to do something big. And I think that Russia probably won't do anything too big over this because, of course, Putin's largely just trying to pick on Britain to a large degree. He's not really trying to start a war with them because, obviously, that's going to mean that NATO is going to get involved. And I'm not sure if he's ready for that heat, at least right now. He's got to get his situation on the front line of Ukraine under control first. So he'll probably simply start more naval escorts. That's my guess. And I doubt the British are going to go that far to start like trying to combat the Russian warships to try to board these tankers. They probably got this one because it was an easy target. It probably didn't have an escort with it, and that's probably why they went for it. And also, obviously, they were very concerned about the photo op aspect of it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I think the Russians are probably going to respond to this because they have to get those tankers through somewhere to get some money. And if the British keep stopping them and seizing them, that's going to pose a major issue. So I would actually say they're probably going to try and increase their patrols to escort these tankers around British waters to stop more of them from being seized. Because if they don't, that could be a pretty serious issue. And I see some people having some issues in the chat with what I was saying about the whole thing being staged early. I saw a weapon say, well, the flag raising at Iwo Jima was restaged for the cameras. That's true, actually. That is actually true. Like, the pictures that everybody knows of the flag raising at Iwo Jima are actually the take done for the cameras. The first flag raising was actually done with a tiny flag on a little pole, and they raised, I think, one guy up there at the top of Mount Suribachi, and then they said, you know, let's do a second round for the cameras, I think a week or two after, so that way we can actually get it on film to show people back home that we took Mount Suribachi. But the thing about this one is that in that one, you didn't hear the guy behind the camera on audio go, Okay, Max, we're rolling. And then, like, they raise it up. Like, if you do something that's choreographed, you gotta try and make it look legitimate, because then it comes off completely different. Like, if you have, like, the director on top of Mount Suribachi with his little hat on, he's got his director's stool in frame, he's sitting there, okay, Maxie, what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the flag, you're gonna raise it up real nicely, all right, and take one. Rolling. And then they, like, raise the flag. Then you'd be like, oh, what a joke. But, like, you don't add that stuff in. You cut that out. You edit it out. And that's what I'm saying about that. Like, if they didn't have the guy literally giving stage instructions in the video that were not unedited, it would have looked a little bit better. It still didn't look that great, to be entirely honest, because it looks like, you know, the people were a little lax, like, clearing the rooms and whatnot, because they were literally just going through the motions at that point for the cameraman for some reason. But, you know, if you have that kind of a situation going on, it's best not to really show that the whole thing's being choreographed, and that's kind of what made that come off wrong, because then it makes it almost come off humorously rather than seriously. But anyways, moving on from that, so that way I can clarify to folks what I actually meant by that, rather than just say, oh, look, it's stage! Because sometimes you do stage stuff for the cameras, like, you know, that stuff that's been done all the time. But you don't make it obvious, though. That's my issue with that footage. But moving us on out of that, and on into the rest of the news that we have, we are very briefly going to cover the Middle East. Now, I'm not going to fast talk this whole segment, but we're going to get through it as quickly as we can. So, earlier in the morning, the Israelis bombed Dahya in the suburbs of Beirut, which is a red line for the Iranians that will make them attack the United States and Israel if Israel conducts that action, and the Israelis went out of their way to bomb it. The President of the United States was absolutely shocked and freaked out and made a whole bunch of statements on social media that they're basically bastards for doing that, called up Netanyahu and apparently cussed him out, according to what we're hearing from Israeli news sources. And then we were able to hear from an Israeli official that spoke also to Channel 12 in Israel that the Israelis actually did intend for the strike in the Dahya suburbs to lead to the Iranians canceling the talks and returning back to strikes. Then we were able to hear that apparently the President of the United States got involved in further talks with the Iranians this morning to be able to try and beg them not to fire at U.S. forces and the Israelis and completely tear up the peace deal. And for a little while there, the Iranians were saying that there was blood on the horizon and that they were going to be trying to slaughter everyone in the region in some upcoming attacks. Apparently, whatever the president did, which the rumor at the time during that moment was that the president was offering some sort of like cash concessions to the Iranians or something along those lines to try and make them stop their attacks against the Israelis. Apparently, whatever the president offered was good enough because the Iranians did not attack, and then the Iranians stated that they were actually going to be getting involved in the deal and signing it. And allegedly, according to the Iranians and the U.S. and the Pakistanis, it has actually been signed and agreed to, apparently over e-sign on email, from what we know. Nevertheless, the terms are still not publicly known, and both sides are claiming entirely separate things about what the terms are. But it does appear that one thing is clear. The Iranians are going to be apparently keeping control of the Strait of Hormuz, and most every other topic that was a topic of discussion for the United States on our demands were largely dropped. We're not demanding a regime change in Iran. We're not demanding a stop of their funding of terrorist forces throughout the region. We're also not going to make them stop their ICBM development and missile programs. And apparently, we're going to be putting back the JCPOA, at least from what we're hearing right now, on Iran. And then also they get to control the strait basically at this point and charge fees, usage fees for ships to go through and whatnot. So basically we agreed from what we're hearing right now, and once again folks, we don't have the actual deal in front of us because for some reason the administration isn't putting it out there for everyone to read outright, so we're just having to work off of what we've been hearing from U.S. officials that have leaked stuff to the press. Basically we agreed to most of Iran's terms today and got almost nothing for ourselves. There wasn't even a mutual sort of an agreement where they gave a little and we gave a little. We basically gave everything to them from what we're hearing right now, and that appears to be ending the conflict. Not for Israel, however. I do want to make that clear. This appears to just be an agreement between the U.S. and Iran. It does not include Israel. So the Israelis are completely outside of the agreement at the moment, and that means that the war is mostly going to be continuing between just Israel and Iran, but the U.S. is completely backed out and is basically walking out of the region at this point for the larger part. That's all I'm going to go into this. I don't even feel like it's worthwhile, folks, to even go into the intricate details. That's basically just a summary of everything that happened today. If you want to look at the details, there is a link in the description below for the day 1572 map, and you can go and click on all of these markers that I put down in the Middle East. But to be entirely frank with y'all, we've wasted way too much breath on this stuff. It's absolutely stupid and asinine, and I don't really feel like wasting more time on this than we need to, so I'm trying to just get through this as quickly as we can. So outside of that, A lot of people right now are talking about their opinion at this moment of what the United States has just done today. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So, what do you think about the deal that's allegedly been agreed to today between the U.S. and Iran, despite Israel not being a party to it, apparently? That's apparently an interesting aspect of it because the deal apparently requires Israel to completely withdraw out of Lebanon, from what we've heard so far, and Israel's not a party to the actual agreement itself. So, that's a little bit strange. The terms are still unclear on many different aspects. I will say this originally, the U.S. Government was saying that the Strait of Hormuz would reopen immediately after the deal was signed. Allegedly, it's already been signed, and the Strait of Hormuz is still not open. Now they're saying it's going to open on Friday, which is about 5 or 6 days away. So the goalpost has already been moved back already, to say the least. So what do you think about the deal? 51% said the U.S. has surrendered, while 36% said the deal is fake, it won't happen, and 7% said Iran probably made some concessions, and that's probably why the deal was reached. So, there's so many things wrong here. So many things wrong. For number one, Hezbollah has been attacking Israel, northern Israel, nonstop with rockets. And we've been seeing footage come out left and right of the northern suburbs of Israel getting hit with rocket attacks. So Israel decided to hit inside of Beirut to get even with Hezbollah. And then the U.S. called them bastards for it and then admonished them, apparently got on the phone and gave them a tongue lashing. And then after that, the U.S. said, don't worry, Iran, we'll fix you. We'll give you some concessions or money or something to make you not counterattack Iran for Israel simply defending their territory. So Iran said, we'll think about it, but what are you going to do for us? And apparently the U.S. started begging and pleading with Iran to start giving them stuff, apparently, earlier today. That's at least how the story is being reported so far. So that's already effed up on its face. Not only should we not be negotiating with the terrorist regime, we definitely shouldn't be begging them for anything, certainly not. But apparently the U.S. has a different way of doing things these days. So now the U.S. president's out here touting this deal, and he's saying that he's the first president in history to make a peace with Iran, despite him literally creating the problem and going to war. He's the one who decided to go to war. And now he's claiming he's solved the problem, and we haven't achieved any of our war objectives. We simply reopened the Strait of Hormuz, or we're trying to reopen it. It still hasn't been reopened, and it was already open before the war started. So he basically created the problem that he's trying to fix. So, this guy's a clown. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say, folks, this is one of the most damn horrific embarrassments that I've ever seen the United States endure over the 4 years. This is the biggest one that we've ever seen over the 4 years that we've been covering news on the channel. It's an absolute shame. It's a disgrace and a stain on the reputation of our great republic. It is a absolute laudable disaster, unbelievably bad. I haven't seen anything like this before in my life. And I haven't been alive long enough, so maybe some will top this one day, but I don't really think much can top this. I mean, I would be shocked if throughout my whole life I see something that is as bad as this in foreign policy. The president got us into a war, half-cocked, because he doesn't know what the hell he's doing or what the hell he's talking about, got us into the war, failed miserably at it because he was in charge of the planning and he doesn't know what the hell he's doing or what the hell he even was supposed to be planning for. The Iranians blockade the strait, which is the one major action they could take to try and screw us over. We do nothing to fix it. And then we sit here and end up in the war declaring a victory by conceding to basically every single one of Iran's demands. That's miserable. There's no way to describe that where that turns out good. If you think that's good, you've got issues. Either you're gullible or you're silly or something, or you have some issues with common deduction and reasoning. I don't even know how people can say that this turned out well. Because if it turned out well, we would have gotten something that we wanted out of Iran. But instead, we got nothing out of Iran. It's basically how it was before the war started, and now they control the Strait of Hormuz from what we're hearing today, and we just basically conceded that to them. So we lost something in the war. That is a defeat by every measure. If we've gained nothing and lost more than we started with, strategically, that's a defeat.
Yeah, I would say so. $100+ billion down the drain. That's one start. The nuclear problem is not fixed. The missile cities are still intact. They just got done excavating them. We saw that on satellite footage, so they have access to all their missiles again. There's no regime change. Mujtaba, the son of the guy they just took out at the beginning of the war, is now in charge. That's not what I would call regime change. Now the president says he never really cared about regime change. The Strait of Hormuz is now being controlled by Oman and Iran, from the looks of it. They still haven't given it up. And the U.S. is now lifting its naval blockade and also making all kinds of concessions to Iran. We don't even know how bad the concessions are yet. We don't know the exact terms in the agreement. It could be that the U.S. has unfrozen a hell of a lot of billions of dollars of assets and given them to Iran. That could be what's in there. And that's what the rumors are right now. So, I mean, if this is not an unconditional surrender, I'm not sure what is. I've like not seen anybody today like able to defend that. Like not even political people. They're like knee deep in politics and on the side of one party or another. I haven't really seen anybody be able to defend that because I'm not sure if there is a way to actually like logically defend it, unless you're just willing to say throw logic to the wind and let's just support this stupid idea just because for the hell of it. Then I'm not really sure. But it's absurd, though, that now this is being lauded as a victory after going $100+ billion in the hole and also not achieving objectives and also losing our young men and women in the war, too. How many people have passed away in this war? Like 13 or something?
13 dead, and there were several hundred wounded. I think somewhere around 400 to 500.
Yeah, and also that figure, that estimate that I'm quoting about the 100 billion, that doesn't even count the damage that's been caused to the region. Like there's probably a hell of a ton of billions of dollars of damage that's caused to the region. We lost, I think it was that $1 billion radar system that was on the ground in the Gulf states that got hit directly by Iran that we lost. So not to mention the entire region's been wrecked. And now, not only that, but now we're at odds with Israel because Israel's refusing to get their people out of Lebanon. And now there's a brewing like a brouhaha between Israel and the United States. So I would say they've effed this up tremendously at this point. If we thought the Afghanistan thing was bad, because we openly criticized that Afghanistan withdrawal, it was a disaster under that last administration. This dwarfs that by a mile.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how bad this is. I saw some people in the chat saying, "I don't believe this. I don't think this is real news." If you want, you can click on the link. I'm not even going to waste the time looking at the shit and reading it. But if y'all are doubting it, I mean, we have all of the receipts right here on the show. You just have to click on the link in the description for the map, go to this map that I have on air, and go right down here to this area of the Strait of Hormuz. And you can click on all the markers that show the statements by the President of the United States today on Truth Social, where he said the deal was signed, the Strait of Hormuz is going to be opened. And that it proves the existence of the deal if we were to assume that today the president's decided to tell the truth when every other day he doesn't. So that would tell you right there that is the deal. I see someone saying now link to the full text of the deal. Well, the president doesn't want to publish that publicly yet, and we haven't seen anyone publish that from either side publicly yet, so we don't have that at the moment. But if you would like to, and I'm all for transparency just like you are, if you would like to get more than we can provide, which is basically just leaked statements from the U.S. government officials, the Iranians, and the Pakistanis, well, you could always write to the President of the United States and ask him to be more transparent, because clearly he never listens to the public, so your letter would be put in the shredder at that point, because I'd love to give you the actual written text of the actual agreement and read it point for point, but considering that the most transparent administration in world history, according to themselves, is the least transparent administration in world history, in reality, I can't actually get you the full text of the agreement and show it to you because they're not willing to publish it for the U.S. public that voted them into office to actually look at it and see if they like it or not, and to give any pushback before it's actually finalized in stone, because this is a memorandum of understanding that leads to a 60-day period to where they're going to talk the whole thing out and then actually get the finalized deal put in stone. We've already given them a lot of concessions already, however, and I would assume that the finalized deal is just going to be putting what we've already agreed to for the memorandum of understanding in stone, and that'll be about it.
And also, like, we don't know all the terms yet. Like, I was saying that earlier as well. We don't know all the terms yet. They're simply not public. So people that's claiming they have the agreement, they're just simply lying to you. If there's YouTube channels out there saying they have the agreement, that's just bogus. They haven't published it. But also, like, even with this alleged agreement in place, like, I think we all know this is not the end of the problem at this point, because apparently Israel's not a party to it. And Israel is not going to get its forces out of Lebanon because they're not going to suddenly start, abandoning self-defense while Hezbollah's launching attacks on them just because the U.S. tells them to. They're not going to do that. That would jeopardize their national security at that point. So this situation is far from over. It seems like it might be coming to an end, but I don't think it will. I think we might be seeing Iran and Israel start lobbing missiles at each other again, and maybe before the deal's even formally signed on Friday, or in Switzerland. I think, is it Friday they're signing it, they said?
I think so, yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, we could see missiles start flying even before then. That could call the whole thing off because Iran might blame us for that, which is why it's pointless to even make a deal with them. It's just, I just really can't believe this, folks, today. Like, it's really just, I'm at a loss for words. Honestly, I could start cussing. I'm so angry about it, to be honest. But I'll save y'all that though, because we'll keep it professional. But it's very irritating.
Yeah, I mean it's something else. And I also got to say, like, this is the time that I'm actually going to spend a little bit to address some people. Some people say, "Oh, y'all aren't reading between the lines. This is actually some grand strategy." Where in the world has the grand strategy been yet? Where has it been? I'm asking legitimately. What in the world over the past 60 days, 2 months of this ceasefire is right around the corner every day shit would give us an idea that they have a grand strategy? And what in the world about the actual war when it was actually fought for the month and a half we were firing at the Iranians would give us an idea that the U.S. actually had a grander strategy then? This administration is completely devoid of grander strategies. It is someone waking up every day and just deciding something on a whim. And then whatever happens in the fiery train wreck that'll follow, it just happens and they try and figure it out day to day. But all the decision making is extremely sporadic. It's not long term. It's incredibly short term, quite literally just the next 24 hours. There's nothing here to say that there's some grand 5D chess strategy that's finally going to be whipped out of the corner, that's going to be pulled out. Like that's something I got to say that starts falling into a cult of personality where someone literally cannot fail, to where like people who like the guy say, well, I mean, clearly he just, like literally wrecked his bicycle and ate shit when he was trying to pull a stunt, but really that was the stunt. Like you like that's just getting into like delusional.
You're so wrong, man. You're so wrong on that. Like, you're so wrong. There is a strategy. I mean, he just demonstrated the strategy. It's surrender. That is the strategy, apparently. So, I don't know. It's like, how did we come to this, people? How did we come to this? I'm like, I remember back when, we had like George Bush, there was no negotiation with terrorists whatsoever. And it was actually like that for the last few, actually, for the most part. But now all of a sudden, we're negotiating with terrorists again. It's like, how did we come back around to this? Not only negotiating with them, but also begging them. It's like, what the hell? It's like that Iran has a leader that won't even come out the closet. Like, he won't even come out of the closet. He's the cardboard leader. They brought out a cardboard cutout of him, and we're sitting there calling him up on the phone, begging him to take it easy on us when we're the biggest superpower on the planet. It's like, if y'all are that weak, then don't start a war. If you're that weak, don't do it. Like, don't.
Also, I also see the commenter that I was specifically addressing there. They said, I didn't say it's 5D chess. Look, man, I'm not one to fall for these stupid Republican shtick games where, like, you say it in a whole bunch of words, and I say, so basically you're saying this, and then you go, no, that's not what I said, because it's not the exact wordage. You said that we're dumping on them because of every action they make, is basically what you said, to summarize it. Put it however you want. You said you're dumping on them because you don't understand the whole situation, and there's probably a lot more going on. That's basically what you said in short. And that is something that is quite literally saying it's 5D chess. You don't know everything. He's about to whip a rabbit out of a hat or pull a hat trick. And that's not happening. This is what it is. Like, this is exactly what it is. It's surrender, basically. So we got into a war with this whole grandiose statement. So we're going to overthrow the regime. We're going to liberate the Iranian people. We're going to stop the nuclear program, stop the funding of terrorism. We're going to save the world. It's going to be peace in the Middle East finally. What do we get? The Islamic regime is still around. They're definitely going to be working on a nuclear weapon now, because why the hell wouldn't they? They need a nuclear weapon to protect them from a future attack, which the U.S. has proven they will conduct attacks on Iran. So they're definitely going to be working towards a nuclear weapon. They're going to increase their funding of terrorist forces in the Middle East, because the United States has basically just washed its hands of this whole thing and said, it's really basically just all on Israel and all on everyone else. So we're not going to be around. So what type of deterrence do they have at that point to not try and soup up Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis as much as they can, to steamroll everything in Yemen, to steamroll everything in Lebanon, and to retake the Gaza Strip? What's going to stop that? And what's going to stop them from continuing on their current course of action of blockading the Hormuz whenever they want on a whim? There's literally nothing to stop them now. That's not a 5D chess move. Yeah. That's an absolute surrender, basically.
And also, outside of the region, what's this telling people? It's like, what's this tell China about Taiwan? It's like, hell, China could go invade Taiwan tomorrow, and then they would get knee deep into it. The U.S. might respond originally, but it gets a little bit too hot, and all of a sudden the U.S. is wanting to back out and start shaking, like they start shivering and shaking, talking about, can we please have a deal? It's like, what is that telling? It's telling China that we're not going to have any resolve whatsoever on anything. What's it telling Russia when Russia wants to try to go attack the Baltics? The U.S. isn't going to show up. Hell, they're backing out of NATO right now because apparently we're scared of Russia from the looks of it. So I'm like, the deterrence of the United States, we are still the world's most powerful military force, but a huge part of that military power that we have is simply deterring our enemies from even starting something in the first place. And if we don't have an element of fear in our enemies, that they know we're going to be brutal if people cross us, then, I mean, people are going to start crossing us left and right because they're going to look at us like punks.
Oh, by the way, adding on to that, someone just said, Matthew, this one's the magnum opus, and actually, funny enough, their name kind of sounds like that. Magnus Zerum said he never claimed he wanted regime change. That has been a very specific thing he said from the beginning.
Bullshit.
Here's Exhibit 1.
When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations.
So there he is right there saying that he wants regime change. You want to back out of that statement? I mean, like, you know, you're saying he never said that. He said that right there. That's literally on film. We have it right here in audio recording.
There's going to be so much rewriting of history at this point. Also, now they're saying that they really didn't care about regime change the whole time. That's what they're saying now. It's the new narrative. It's just constant lies. And what's even more disturbing to me is people will hear these constant nonstop lies. And some people, now granted, it's not everybody. It's like a small percentage of people. It's probably like 20%, 25% of Americans or something like that. They'll come out and find a way to start, squirming around like a snake, trying to find a way to justify it. It's like, instead of trying to justify it, let's just be honest here. Put everybody's bias aside for a second and simply look at the reality of it. They said they were going to try to do regime change. That's what they said at the beginning. And then they didn't get the regime change. And now they're trying to pretend like regime change was something they were never going for in the first place. And I thought that before they said they had regime change, that Mojtaba was the regime change. I'm like, but the story is changing so much. It's like you can't even keep up with how the story is changing.
Yeah, and I mean, like also on top of that, they never wanted regime change, but we got really angry with the Kurds because we gave them a whole bunch of guns to smuggle into Iran so the Iranian citizens could conduct a regime change. And then we got angry with the Kurds when they basically stole them and didn't give them over to the Iranians that were supposed to be conducting the regime change. But clearly, we never wanted regime change. That was never even a priority. We never even cared about that. That was just a whole lie that the president said. And no matter how you go about this, there are humongous lies in any way. So if we're lying about giving the Kurds guns to overthrow a regime change, that means he was lying about regime change the whole time, although he was openly saying that's what we wanted. If we're saying that we did want regime change, now he's saying that was never even a priority, he's lying about that. Like, no matter what way you look at it, there's a humongous lie that was had at some point where the entire U.S. public was just completely misled to believe one thing when it was in fact the other. There's no way to look at that to where, oh, actually everything he said was above board and it was honest, John. Like, it couldn't have been more honest if you tried. Like, there was clearly a flat-out lie out there somewhere. Or, for example, yesterday, CENTCOM said, we actually got the report right here, I believe. Let me see here. Let me see. Do I have that CENTCOM? I don't have that CENTCOM report on the map, actually, I don't believe. Well, maybe I do. Hold up. Let me make sure to check. Speaking about military plan. Oh, here we are. CENTCOM said that the Strait of Hormuz is open for transit on this Thursday. Well, the president said today that the Strait of Hormuz is now finally open. Let me see here. Here we are. Thank you, Victoria. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, and the Strait of Hormuz will be opening up for business very shortly. So today on Sunday, the Strait of Hormuz isn't open, but it's going to be open very soon, finally, for once and for last. But according to CENTCOM on Thursday, they said it was already open.
But that's that post you just read off right there from them. That's not the most recent one. The most recent one says it'll open on Friday. So they pushed it back to Friday. That's going to open. So they said shortly, like implying that it was going to be at the signing, like that happened today. Now they're saying it's going to be Friday. So the story changed already within the course of less than like 7 hours or something like that. It's just bullshit galore. It's just like nonstop. It's like at some point, it's like, I mean, what are we going to do here? Just start accepting this is the norm at this point. It's like, well, this is just irritating.
It is irritating, and like I already see people in the chat. Like, sadly, I gotta say, folks, like if you've been around for a while and you're trying to justify the stuff in the chat right now, my opinion of you isn't improving. It's greatly decreasing. If you've been around for a minute, you're trying to defend the stuff. How the hell can you defend a statement on Thursday that says the Strait of Hormuz is open and hundreds of ships, as a matter of fact, have transited the last 2 months? And then the president's now saying today that the Strait of Hormuz isn't open and it's going to be opening. How in the world do you justify statements like that? You can't. Those are all flat out lies. This statement is a lie. The last statement was a flat out lie. They're all flat out lies.
Holy moly.
Damn!
James Hughes, by the way, outside of all that, James Hughes is throwing a $500 to the fundraiser right now, by the way. That brought us up to $2,200 raised. We were only $300 away from the goal. All of a sudden, thanks to James Hughes and Nicholas Condor for each throwing in a $500, by the way. That's fantastic. On a positive note, thank you, James Hughes, for making it positive tonight. Because honestly, I hate the Iran topic at this point because it's not positive whatsoever. It's embarrassing as hell as an American to see that. But a huge shout out to James Hughes for supporting Ukraine. Because one thing I will say, Ukraine's not confused about defending themselves. They know exactly what to do, and they're doing it effectively. So at least somebody somewhere knows what they're doing. So a huge shout out, and hopefully that helps the Ukrainians.
And I would have to say a humongous thanks to you as well, James Hughes, for that unbelievable support. Because right now we are about $322 away from the fundraiser goal of $2,500. For a while there, folks, I was getting kind of concerned we might not hit that tonight, but it looks like it's right within our grasp. We're very close, and so hopefully we'll be able to see that we hit it here incredibly soon. So humongous thanks to you for that incredible support and helping the channel to keep on supporting amazing nonprofits like Rasm for Ukraine, James Hughes. And with that in mind, folks, I'm going to be, oh my God, Charles just threw in 100. Dang, that's crazy. I think at this point, we are, oh my goodness. We are
200 smackaroos away. 200 smackaroos. Actually, less than 200 smackaroos.
Oh my lordy. Man, that's crazy. Honestly, we're getting very close. But with that, folks, I'm going to be dropping the Middle East topic here, like myself. I don't know about you, Matthew. I feel like we kind of beat the horse dead over the past couple of months. I'm just going to summarize it here. Foreign policy failure, it's basically a U.S. defeat. This is extremely embarrassing to a proud nation, and at this point, if you expect me to say anything good about the president and foreign policy, you're sorely mistaken. That's probably not going to be happening.
You say this is the end of it, but tomorrow we'll probably be going live middle of the day to cover the Iran missile attacks on Israel. So it's over for now. Honestly, folks, like we're going to start trying to like focus completely on like the Taiwan-China situation, like we usually did, the Ukraine-Russia situation. Oh my God, we hit the goal!
We hit the goal! Hey! Hey! Gabby White threw in 100! Jagga, Igor, блядь! Сука, блядь! Пиздики ты нахуй, блядь! Hila McLeod threw in 100! Блядь! Man, that's unbelievable. The fundraiser is blowing up right now. It went from like 3 to like 2.6 right now in like literally like 20 minutes. That's wild, folks. A big shout out to everybody who's supporting the fundraiser right now. Y'all are killing it. But Matthew, get back to what you were saying there. What were you saying?
So I was saying, also a huge shout out to the fundraiser, by the way. That's fantastic. It's well over the goal at this point, like literally instantly, by the way. So a huge shout out. But also, like I was saying, though, like generally, we're going to pretty much just be covering the Middle East if there's breaking news happening on it. Like, for example, if Iran lobbs missiles at Israel, the other way around. Trying to cover the like sequence of events from the U.S. Foreign policy perspective is something that we're going to start toning down. I think we both agreed to sort of tone that down in recent days, and we kind of have been doing that already. But that's what we're going to start doing because it's just too much. Like I'm sure for the viewers, including ourselves, it's hard to cover it. To be honest, even on our end, I'm sure for the viewers it's irritating as well. So we'll just cover the big events on it, but we're not going to cover all the minutia like day to day. Like it's getting too much, and at this point it's just chaos.
Yeah, I would have to like I think I already spoke my 2 cents on it, but I will say this, folks. The channel is politically neutral. We do not take a side, but if you think, as a political person, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, that if your guy is in the office and he does an absolutely stupid decision, like sell Florida to like Russia or something, and you think we're going to sit by and go, oh, maybe he's got some points, you're absolutely out of your damn mind. Like, that's not happening. That's not ever happening. That's not how the channel's ever been run. That's not how it's being run now. If you're a part of the cult worshiping groups for the left and the right, and you expect to get an echo chamber here, that's never happening. So if I'm going to say this up front, and this is going to be the one warning for the rest of the night. If I see a single TDS or MAGA in the chat about us, it's an instant ban. Like that's just flat out. That's how it's been for years. That's how it's going to be for now, for sure. But moving us on out of that, it is time for us to move on and up and into the rest of the war in Ukraine, because we do have a lot of news coming out from this area. In the area of Novokubishevsk, we were able to see that the refinery is still burning quite nicely. This was actually Ukrainian drone POV going into Novokubishevsk.
It looks like it did a fantastic work right there. I see Firepoint's now apparently putting their logo on stuff. They're trying to get that advertising in.
Man, Firepoint trying to make that cash. Honestly, they'll probably get a lot of orders for like their drones because they're pretty high end. Meanwhile, over in the area of Tula, near to the area of Novomakovsk, we were able to see the Azot chemical plant is still burning. And we're going to have to mute that music right there. But that Azot chemical plant do be burning like it's made of chemicals. In the next clips that we got out of Tula, we also got to see some ongoing attacks on the city of Tula in this clip right here. Devil, I believe. And we also got to see here a fire in the distance, in the shimmering distance. Moving us on from that clip, we also got to see here a little air defense. Maybe. Possibly. It is. Very rare. Moving us on from that clip, we also get to see the fires in the Tula city area. We also get to see additionally that another clip came out of Tula on fire. Take a look at this. Bleed. Moving us on out of all of those clips in Tula, it's now time for us to finally get on into the frontline news that we have not been able to cover yet today. Moving us on into our first clip near to the area of the Kursk Oblast, we did get to see that the Ukrainians in the Steel Border Brigade were making sure to target and hit Russian forces in a high degree within this area, including this Russian artillery piece.
A very high degree. Look at that.
Man, high degrees. It's high temperature, like that meat.
And I'll tell you what, after that Iran talk, it got so hot in here, I'm over here sweating right now. I had to go turn the AC down a little bit.
I'm not gonna lie, man, if I probably looked in the mirror right now, my face would be red with anger. Like, I can feel it on my face, like that burning feeling you get on your skin when you just get filled with anger and rage. Man, I tell you something, it's ridiculous.
Oh, man. You're either stupid or you're crooked. You're stupid or you're crooked. You're stupid or you're crooked.
Or you could be both.
Man, but I'll tell you what, Ukraine, though, they know exactly what to do here. They're taking stuff out piece by piece.
Man, they're taking them apart brick by brick.
Well, sounds almost like a Lego reference. That can be dangerous.
American Fort PD, open up! But anyway, soon us on out of that and on to our location unknowns, we also get to see that the Russians are continuing to conduct battle drills for pipe crawling.
Oh, no, not the pipe again.
По трубе. Бурый, ты у нас косячник. Взял автомат, полез в трубу.
The rifle is a stick. He now gets into the pipe, which is an oil can.
Или ты ночь, как баба.
Oh, they're kicking him in the ass.
Ползи,
Oh, well, they're really about to get into the drill.
Еще прилет. Кассета.
Oh, my God.
Быстрее ползи, бля.
Bro.
Кассета. Баба
What the hell?
бля. Вот так, нахуй. Сейчас будем отрабатывать.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't
What
even know.
kind of drill is this? No, this isn't even a drill. This is like just straight up hazing.
This is just punishment. Like, this is punishment for what he did. I don't know. But, you know, it already looked like he had received some punishment. We're looking at that eyeball up there. It looks kind of like a little black. So, you know, I think he might have been punished a little bit for some sort of an infraction. What he did, we have no clue. But, you know, as usual, the Russians do whatever the hell they do. Anyways, we got to see a Ukrainian Special Forces operator in this picture from the 3rd Regiment of the SOF of Ukraine. The pick went hard, so I just wanted to show it to y'all. I thought it was cool.
That honestly is pretty cool right there, I will say.
And we also got to see some pictures of this M142 HIMARS at work. These were very aesthetic, so I also had to show these to y'all as well.
Oh, yes, that is. Oh, wow. Wow. Now, notice the Ukrainians' positions are so clean. It's almost like AI looking. It's so clean. Even the truck is clean.
Man, honestly, man, I'm not gonna lie, man. This stuff looks like a marketing pitch. Like you would put this on like a brochure. The M142 HIMARS at like an arms expo. It looks really good, honestly. Like these pictures here were done by a professional. Like the framing, the looks of it and all. Really something right there. And I gotta say, one hell of a blast. Moving us on from that bit, we also were able to see, which I have to go and grab here really quickly on the side, because I think I have the Kyiv Independence, so I want to make sure to go grab Miss Desis, because Miss Desis sent one to me earlier today. So let me go get that here really quickly. And right here, we have the Russian casualty reports. And holy moly, they lost one special equipment, one Bobcat.
Oh, that's still decent. I mean, a one's bigger than 0. I mean, that's a win.
And would you look at that? Look at that. Miss DC, Keeper of the Record stated that Russian losses to June 14th of 2026, day 1,572. Personnel 7-day average loss over 1,300, 2 weeks to 1.4 million. 401 supply trucks and fuel trucks is the 7th highest daily loss of that category, and 2,132 drones ranks as the 26th highest. We've also been able to see that 13 ground robotic complexes is the 3rd highest loss as well. Very nice to see. And over the course of the past 24 hours, 1,440 Russian soldiers have been turned into glue, along with 5 tanks, 14 APCs, 57 artillery pieces, 3 MLRSs, 1 air defense system, 2,132 drones, 13 ground robotic complexes, 401 supply trucks, and 1 Bombcat. I gotta say, you know, I made that joke about the Russian soldiers getting turned into glue. I really have to ask the question, folks, because I don't actually know the answer to this. Why in the world is it that only the horses are sent to the glue factory? Is there like something special about horses that they are like easily turned into glue? What's up with that?
I have no idea. I've never even heard of that.
You've never heard of the joke of sending like a bad horse to the glue factory?
No, I've never heard that.
Let me type this in. Why do horses go to the glue factory? We must find this out. Huh, so apparently it's because their bones, hides, and connective tissues are incredibly rich in collagen, and when they're boiled, the protein acts as a binding agent that dries clear and lasts for a long time. And thus, that is the reason why horses go to the glue factory. But moving us on out of that, very interesting side note there, it's time for us to get on up into Vovchansk, as we were able to see that many Russians were also turned into glue at the glue factory by Ukrainian FPV drones. And also, do we have new news coming out right now?
Yeah, I have a little bit of news right now I wanted to hit real quick when it's fresh. It just apparently came out. It looks like some U.S. lawmakers are picking up on the attack. It looks like some lawmakers that are generally friendly with the president, actually, that are picking up on that attack that Russia just conducted on that monastery, the really large, like very famous one, I would say, not infamous, but the famous one inside of Kyiv. It looks like a lot of different lawmakers are starting to say that this is awful, and they're starting to call it out for the most part. So that's notable, because usually we don't see these folks right here pointing that out to a large degree. They'll generally try to ignore it, but this one here appears to have caught people's attention, which it should, by the way, because Russia literally hit a monastery, a religious site that's very famous for no reason whatsoever, trying to hurt civilians. So maybe something will happen out of this possibly, but I wouldn't count on it.
Yeah, we'll have to see, but honestly, at this point, I wouldn't expect anything to come out of it, sadly. But moving us on out of that, we have been able to see that within the Kupiansk area, Russian forces were also getting hit within this area by the 77th Air Mobile Brigade. We see here the Russians moving into their position covered with a net. And the Ukrainians just realized that they netted themselves in. It's like fish going right into the fishing net. Very easy job, really. And they're about to take care of it. A fresh catch. And we see the post burning down afterwards. A beautiful sight to see in the north of Vovchansk front. Moving us on from the area of Vovchansk and Kupiansk, we also get to see within the Lyman area some Ukrainian soldiers conducting evacuations of the wounded in the 66th Mechanized Brigade. I hear music.
Dang, they added music to it. Why did they have to do it?
It wasn't even like real music. It was just a bass tone on a keyboard. It's like, damn, I gotta mute it over that too, because we'll actually get copyrighted for that. We see them here driving around in their Rova, call them Ed Sharpova when they see Oxman's Ova.
Oh wow, this got really trippy looking.
Man, it's like a acid trip or something. Oh, look, it's a UGV going to evacuate the wounded.
That is still really cool how they pull those things up on a trailer like a four-wheeler. They get the remote out and start driving the thing out into the wild blue yonder to pick people up. It's really wild.
It is really cool, honestly. And it's also really neat to know that they can cut down on how many stretcher bearers they need, because the little UGV does the job of like 6 men, basically. We see them now making their way back out of the area after they dropped off the UGV, Bliet. And there it goes on its way to go pick up the wounded.
Looks like they're using like a normal like RC control that you usually fly like those model planes with and stuff like that. They simply bound it to the ground vehicle.
Yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it? That's a pretty ingenious sort of a thing. We now see the UGV pulling up. We can already see the soldiers getting ready to load the wounded man onto the UGV. And here they come walking him on over. And now they're getting him ready to be seated in the UGV for the ride out. We can see that they put like a temporary splint on his leg, so it looks to be a leg injury.
What just prevents the Ukrainians from, like, you know, putting like a Russian emblem on the side of it and driving it straight to a Russian outpost or something and you know, doing something?
Well, generally the Geneva Convention it kind of stops them from doing that because that would be false identification, which is a war crime. But they do
Geneva suggestion.
Well, nowadays, but outside of that, I mean, they
I'm joking. By the way, just made that clear.
They kind of do that, but not with these. Like, they have smaller versions of these with TM62 anti-tank mines, and they drive them at full speed across the fields right into the Russian posts, and then they detonate it kind of like an IED once it flies in. It's literally like seconds after it slams into a dugout, it can explode right onto the Russian forces. So they kind of do that. It's just not with that drone. But moving us on from that clip near the Lehman area and moving us on down to Debaltseve, we did get to see that a Russian rail yard was hit within this area last night by Ukrainian drone forces, causing significant damage to another major railhead. We also got to see that near to the area of Shakova Balka, on one of the highways leading into Donetsk, Ukrainian B-2 drones are also conducting strikes on Russian supply trucks and vehicles deep behind the lines in the Donetsk region, as well as the land bridge.
They could drive the little ground vehicles though, like toward the Russians, and use it as an attack vehicle if it didn't have the Russian emblem on the side of it, so that way they weren't trying to mimic the Russian forces and, you know, make it look like it's theirs. But, you know, I'm not even sure the Russians would notice it because they use ground vehicles like that too now, so it might blend in with theirs, and they might not be able to tell whose it is. It was just sort of like, you know, a general looking drone.
They probably wouldn't be able to. We also got to see some gas lines forming in Donetsk, as we're now hearing the gas shortages have also hit Donetsk city. Donetsk город, блядь.
Man, the Russian occupied areas aren't being governed that well. It looks like they're experiencing times that they hadn't ever experienced since they were in the USSR. It looks like the shortages.
Man, it looks like the Russian occupied areas are being occupied and administered so badly, many of people in these occupied territories are going to be left without an occupation before long. In many ways.
Honestly, it looks like it sucks, really. I wouldn't want to live here.
Bleed. That's a long line for gas. What I see here? What we got here? Oh, look. They only have one type of gas. It was octane 95, and that was it. Everything else was unavailable. And Hal Rose just threw in a 333. Dang!
Whoa! Hal Rose, what are you doing? You just took us over the $3,000 mark right there with that. Look at that. We're at almost $3,200 raised right now. How is this possible?
You know, the fundraiser started off, folks, tonight real slow, like, and then it's become like a snowball. It's rolling down the hill and getting a lot of momentum. And it's almost up at like 3.3 at this point. Actually, 3.2. That is quite a lot over the fundraising goal. That's like $750. God dang. That's unbelievable, really. I mean, that's crazy. I got to say a big shout out to everybody who's been massively supporting this thing recently, because y'all been getting this thing well over the fundraiser mark of 2.5. It's almost a 3.5 at this point. But moving us on to the Konstantinivka, we also got to see Russian forces getting hit by the 39th Unmanned Aerial Systems Battalion. They have like this RoboCop-looking emblem for their unit, but we can see them here getting ready to drop a bomblet, and there it goes. Right into the chimney, into the chimney, as the First Lady would call it. But we can also see them continuing to drop the bomblets into the roof. Hey, yo, which one of these drone bomblets is rigged on Gawk, huh? We can also see them continuing to hit more Russian forces around this area of Konstantinivka. Oh, bliat. Would you look at that? We see them continuing to hitting quite nicely. And I just got a stage instruction of these videos starting to drag. I actually thought they were kind of...
I was just wondering if we could just watch the ones that show, like, you know, the bigger events and stuff like that, because some of these are getting kind of redundant.
But Matthew, we're all about redundancy. Like in Britain, it's a bad thing to be made redundant. Here in America, it's good to have redundancies. It's called safety. Like, it's a good thing. But moving us on from that, we also got to see the Ukrainians defending themselves against Russian drones today in the National Police, which is pretty cool. Oh, and they had music, but they shot that drone down, and then they shot down this one. I mean, honestly, these Ukrainians are like marksmen. The way they be working hard and shooting down these drones. We see them here popping another one with one shot, believe it or not. One shot. That was the trick. And this guy got one with a shotgun. This guy got one with a rifle at like 200 yards. And we see them continuing to hit ambush drones as well near the drone netting. And taking out this recon drone that appears to be hovering at a high altitude and is now plummeting to the ground below. Heavens be. We see them continuing to hit them. That's generally the end of that clip. Moving us on from that, we also were able to see some Ukrainian soldiers on the move in the area around Konstantinivka take a gander. And they had music. So we see them getting behind the Max Pro here, covered in bristles. And now showing off some more destroyed equipment nearby that's been burned out around destroyed rubble. Some burnt out houses. You now see them here continuing to show themselves as they move around. And some more fires in the area, most likely caused from recent artillery strikes. But this is a little bit of a look at the near frontline area around the battlefield of Konstantinivka. Moving us on from that clip, and a little bit further down the front, we also were able to see the work of the 93rd, the famous fighting 93rd today, near to the Pokrovsk front, which was able to target and hit a great deal of Russian supply trucks. Moving us on from that clip, and on into the next one after that, we were also able to see some other interesting clips here on the southern front, including this one, which I'd have to say is quite a treat. You see here in this clip, the Russians were actually attempting another assault on the city of Sevastapol, and it turns out that the first vehicle in the column actually blew up on a mine. So the rest of the Russians just decided to turn around and go home. There's the vehicle hit by a mine up there and blown up. You see the rest of them literally turned around already and getting ready to leave.
Oh, damn. It's the motorcycle gang pulling out.
Man, honestly, that's kind of wild. One car got blown up, and they decided to completely call off the whole attack and turn around and leave.
Not a bad call.
Now we see the Evola gathered in the rear line. Oh no! Oh no, that car got blown up. Oh man, terrible.
How did that happen after they started going and retreating? How'd they get hit?
Oh, well, you know, it's those pesky, pesky drones. And you know that you really can't escape the drones anymore. You know those attacks on the M14 highway are pretty wild, Matthew, but do you know how in the world they actually communicate with those drones at that distance to be able to strike the Russian trucks without using the long-range sorts of comms that are used for, like, the Lyudis and the FP1s and the FP2s? Do you know how they actually do that?
Probably by relays, either like on other drones or something like that.
You're absolutely right. They actually do have a specialized drone now designed for mid-range relay communications that they can send up in the air for an hour at a time. It's able to hover at an altitude of 900 meters for an hour straight, and this thing is used as a relay to communicate to the medium-range attack drones that are hitting the trucks on the M14 highway. So really neat, actually. I didn't know that these sorts of support drones existed like this, but this is actually how they're communicating with the medium-range strike drones that are attacking the trucks on the M14. We also had one other clip here of more Russian forces getting hit by ambush drones, which we could see in this clip. And look, here they come on the dirt bike, and then it pops up, and he's like, oh no! And then they got him. Oh no! Ooh! And they got this dirt bike and another outpost, and maybe even another outpost as well. Maybe a second one here. Ooh, in a UAZ 469 and a D30. Some really impressive hits. We also got to see in the Zaporizhia area a very interesting vehicle. They call it Ledok. Look at it.
Man, look at that thing with the white walls on it. This is the Ukrainians, by the way. Honestly, man, it's kind of cool, actually. Like, it's not junky looking. It's just sort of awkward. But oh, look at this dude right here. He's going to show this guy a lesson who's filming, apparently. He doesn't like being filmed. Man, that's actually kind of a neat car.
Man, you're completely missing the guy who's literally aiming an AT-4 at the cameraman over there. Right, he's got a whole anti-tank recoilless rifle over there.
I didn't see that. Yeah, I see it now, though.
Bro, that's all, bro. You're like, oh, look at that machine gun. Meanwhile, this guy got the heavy artillery whipped out. I was like, damn, look at that. But man, that is.
These are gangsters. These are gangsters in a duckmobile.
Let me actually go and pull this thing up on the side for y'all. It's an LUAZ. Let's see, AZ 967. Because these things actually were pretty common back in the Soviet days. Because these things were produced from 1961 to 1975. And I need to get y'all a picture of one of these where it's not covered in a net. Here we are. That's it. That's what it actually looks like without the netting and everything on it.
Honestly, it's kind of like, it kind of reminds me of like those airport vehicles they use to get around the airport, like when they're doing work around the planes and stuff like that. But it's like a little bit more utilitarian looking than even that.
You know what it kind of reminds me of? It reminds me of the U.S. Army Mule vehicle. Let me see if I can show you. Here we are, the M274 Mule, which was used by airborne units for a while during like the 60s to the 80s, but they got rid of these things because, you know, they're you know, not really that useful actually. Or, you know, it kind of reminds me of the other odd one, the Gamma Goat. Have you ever seen the Gamma Goat before?
No, I have not.
That's the Gamma Goat right here.
That is actually, I actually like that, actually. I think it's pretty neat.
Dude, it's actually really cool. It's an articulated body. So, like, the trailer and the vehicle are actually one unit, which is kind of neat. You can detach the trailer, but it's supposed to be operated as an articulated vehicle. And these things were actually pretty cool, too. They were also used by airborne units back in the day. But I got to say, folks, the Mule and the Gamma Goats are really cool to me. I absolutely love them. And I feel like this thing here, the 967, it kind of falls in that weird, like, hybrid ground of almost being like a little ATV car sort of a thing, kind of like the Mule and the Gamma Goats. Kind of cool though. I have to say it's like not the worst thing I've ever seen that's been made in the Soviet Union. And also it's amphibious, so you can actually float around in these things.
Oh, yeah, I like that. I like that.
Yeah, pretty cool. But moving us on out of that clip, it's now time for us folks to go on up and into Kyiv, because it's time for us to cover the speech from the President of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky. And let me see here if it'll load up. Come on, hit us with it. And here we are. The speech.
He's outside. He's outside. He's getting some sunlight out there. I think, unfortunately, though, I think this was before the Russians attacked, sadly. So I think.
It actually is. So without further ado, here's the speech. Peach!
Шановні українці, українки, щойно я говорив з президентом Сполучених Штатів Америки, з президентом Трампом, привітав його з днем народження, з Днем американської армії. Сьогодні два свята в Америці, і ми дуже добре поговорили з ним. Не тільки привітання були, багато ключових тем і про війну, і про її коріння, і про дипломатичні можливості, і про позиції наших партнерів. Говорили довго, дуже детально. У нас побажання одне для президента Трампа, у всіх українців, щоб нарешті вдалося досягти миру, щоб ми змогли досягти цього успіху разом з Америкою, разом з усіма нашими партнерами. Це найголовніше, чого ми всі хочемо. І важливо, що американське суспільство повністю підтримує це, наше українське прагнення до достойного миру, підтримує нас у захисті від російської війни. І абсолютно правильні слова президента Трампа сьогодні були, зокрема, про наш Крим. Саме із захоплення Криму Росією все почалося. І що якби тоді було сильне лідерство, то усієї війни просто не було б. Я подякував президенту Сполучених Штатів Америки за всю допомогу, яку надали Сполучені Штати. Ми домовились про нашу з ним зустріч. Найближчими днями в Європі будуть формати Групи 7. Звісно, Україна і наш захист, наші можливості прийти до миру будуть серед головних тем. Є вже активний графік на весь наступний тиждень, також з нашими європейськими партнерами і усіма учасниками Групи 7. Важливий буде тиждень. Розраховуємо на результати. Передусім, безумовно, ППО для України, політичні домовленості, які посилять наш захист тут в Україні, буде відкриття кластеру. Кластер для України та Молдова і кроки на довготривалий мир. Обговоримо з нашими партнерами деякі ідеї, поки що не публічно. Сьогодні є також за що нам подякувати, особливо Британії. Затримали російський нафтовий танкер своїх берегів. І це перший такий крок саме британців. За цей рік в європейських морях стали доброю традицією затримки російського тіньового флоту. І нафта має зупинятись, щоб російська війна наближалась до зупинки. Дякую, Британії. Будемо говорити з партнерами в Європі і про те, щоб законодавчі зміни нарешті дозволили надовше арештовувати танкери, які заробляють гроші на війну для Путіна, виключно для нього, і конфісковувати цю нафту. Сьогодні ми в Україні оприлюднили також свіжі дані від розвідок про звіти та документи, які кладуть на стіл російському керівництву, неприємні для нього звіту, і то ще не повністю правдиві. Рейтинги і Путіна, і його правлячої партії знижуються дуже відчутно, тенденцію не змінити. Він про це повинен знати, повинен це відчувати. Особливо відповідаючи негативно на наші пропозиції зустрічі, перемовин, реального закінчення війни. Звісно, вдячний кожному нашому воїну, усім українцям, які захищають позиції нашої держави, які працюють на Україну, які допомагають нам відстоювати національні наші українські інтереси. Цього літа треба бути усім максимально ефективними, активними. Жодного дня не втрачаємо і не втрачаємо жодної можливості. Розраховуємо на результати від наступного тижня і працюємо на це. Слава Україні!
Herom Slava.
Herom Slava.
And with that is the end of the speech from the President of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky, here on day 1572 of the news from around the world. And with that in mind, folks, we're actually going to be moving on to the second segment of the stream where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And I got to say, folks, that tonight has been one hell of a fundraiser. At the beginning, it was going a little slowly, but then it became a flooding torrent and has now hit a whopping $3,177 raised as of this moment right now. Matthew, who are some of the names that have been able to help this fundraiser to get to where it is right now?
All right. So calling off again some of them just to give them another shout out, by the way, we did have that 500 from both Nicholas Condor and James Hughes. A huge shout out to both Nicholas and James for two of the largest ones of the night. We also had a 333 from Hal Rose. A huge shout to Hal as well as a 100 from Charles, Gabby White, Ella MC Wills, Nafo, and also a 50 from Bex Chitwood. And a huge shout out to all of our top donors once again and everybody that's donated once again tonight to help us bring the Ukraine fundraiser almost up to $3,200 raised, which is well above the goal at this point. I'll be honest, I was a little bit worried myself. I was thinking that fundraiser was looking a little bit slow. It was creeping like a snail. It was not going as slow as the Russians moving on a front line, but it was going slow by normal terms. I was like, what's going on? But now it's well above the goal right here. I should have had faith from the beginning. But Enforcer, what say you?
We had to just believe, Matthew. We had to believe, and we didn't. And we've been proven wrong again. The Lee Spring Army has once again rallied and greatly surpassed and destroyed another fundraiser goal. And I gotta say, humongous congrats and a huge thanks to every single one of y'all who has supported tonight, both big and small, as y'all have all contributed to make this fundraiser a possibility again tonight and help to save lives around the world on the very topics that we covered. And so with that in mind, it is time for us to move on into the live chat questions and the Morse code decoders of the night. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so it's now time to talk to y'all. Y'all been waiting all night long. You've been listening, you've been processing, you've been thinking about what we've been saying. Some people have been not so happy with it. Some people have been happy with it. You know, some people say a lot of stuff, but all we know is we have live chat questions to get to, and we also have Morse code decoders to get to. And so far tonight, we had the entire Morse code roster. We had Paul, Kevin, Mason, Joni, Norm, also Arabelle, her Royal Fluffiness Coach, Crypteric Sire, and Brian. And it said the Morse code said, it seems like the word is being given to retreat. So long, Crimea and the Island of Tears. LLT, LSA.
And ding, 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 ding. Shh. And that is the sound of money. That's dead on the nail. That's the Morse code message of the night. And I gotta say, I hope that in Russian memory, Crimea is remembered as the island of tears, because it's been a real sad time for them. One L after the other. I tell you, folks, they're taking so many L's down there in Crimea that you just couldn't find that many in the English alphabet even. It's unbelievable. But a humongous thanks to y'all once again for deciphering that Morse code, and we're always amazed by the Morse code deciphering capabilities of none other than the Lee Spring Army Signal Corps. So a big shout out to y'all once again out there. Really impressive. And with that in mind, it's time for us to move on and into the next one. So what do we got?
Also, I want people to come clean. How many people watched that UFC fight? In fact, I think it's still going, actually. Like, I don't know how long those things usually run, but apparently it's still on right now, the whole thing at the White House right now. But I think we had some people out watching that UFC thing tonight. I think some people might have come into the stream a little bit later on tonight. So I'm curious. Like, I might run a poll on it maybe to see how many people did it. I see a lot of people saying, nope, nope, nope. Some of y'all were here from the beginning of the stream, so I know some of y'all didn't watch it, but I watched a little bit of it. And, you know, me personally, I'm not a huge fan of UFC. I'm not a huge fan of, like, most combat sports, really. I watch it from time to time if it's like a big fight or something, but I don't really, like, put my whole life and stuff into it and all that stuff. So, you know, not really my thing on a traditional sense, but it was, that's a massive stadium they set up on that White House lawn, by the way. I didn't understand the scale of it until I saw the Paramount stream on my TV over here. I was like, dang, that's a massive stadium they built out there. Apparently they were walking the fighters out of the White House. Like, they're using the White House as like a staging room or something to bring the fighters out to the stage. At least that's what it appeared like on the video I was watching. So, I mean, that's just sort of an odd thing there, but sort of an interesting fight. I see most people saying they didn't watch it. Excuse me. I see joking right there, but I see most people saying they didn't watch it, actually, which, you know, honestly, I can't blame you.
Man, you know something, folks? I gotta say, I just kind of realized this. I saw someone throw in a live chat on this a little bit a while ago. Isn't it kind of weird, folks, that you know, this event and the Army's parade last year all happened on June 14th? Isn't that kind of a little odd, a little convenient, don't you think?
Well, you know something worse than that? Let me go double check this, by the way, and see if this is the case. Let's see here. Yeah, the U.S. Army's official Twitter page was actually like tweeting out like videos of this thing right now, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, I thought that wasn't allowed, but apparently it's allowed now, or they're just doing it anyway, one or the other.
Well, but I gotta say, folks, that's really fascinating, you know, because I remember last year they said, well, the parade's just being held on the president's birthday because it's the Army's 250th birthday, just coincidentally. But for some reason this year as well, the whole WWE Slamdown thing is also just coincidentally held on the president's birthday. I'm not getting political in that observation, but I am making the observation, though, and saying, isn't that a little bit particularly odd? And also the peace deal had to be agreed to today on the president's birthday as well. Like, you know, the world revolves around some stupid inconsequential day like that. Like, you know, like I'll tell you this, folks. You know, one thing that this channel schedule doesn't run around is my birthday or Matthew's. If our birthday falls on the stream day, we're just running a show. That's it. Like, there's no special anything that goes on the show either. It's just, it happens to be our birthday, but we're working. You know, you don't see us going, okay, everybody, we're going to have like an LSA fan meet on our birthday so that we all can all come and, like, you know, glaze us when we turn a year older. Like, that's really dumb to me, honestly. But anyways, apparently observing, you know, that kind of narcissistic pampering is apparently TDS these days. I thought that was called, you know, recognizing something stupid and being a man, but apparently the definition of a man is being like a, you know, kind of like a narcissist these days and being real, you know, delusional. But anyways, with that, we're on the next one.
All right, so jumping into our live chats here, our first live chat is going to go to none other than AF Kaplan. He said, does the U.S. Senate need to ratify this so-called peace treaty, actually surrender in his words? He said, between the U.S. and Iran. And I believe they have to, I think. The president has the right to enter into treaties, but I think it's subject to review by the Senate. But don't quote me on that, though. I'm not super confident in that. And Forster, are you looking that up, by the way? Because I'm kind of curious to see exactly what the real answer is on that.
Let's see here. I'm just going to go look at the U.S. Constitution because that'll tell us what the Congress can do. Let's see, U.S. Constitution text. Let me go get it from the National Archives. So let's go look at the enumerated duties of the Congress. Let's see here. Borrow money or credit. Let's see.
Oh, wait a minute. I just remembered something while you're reading that. This is not a treaty. This is an MOU. That's an important distinction right there. The Memorandum of Understanding is simply a framework agreement. It's basically saying we agree to talk about these issues in the future. So that's a big distinction, actually. So in that case, since it's an MOU, the Senate does not have to ratify it under that premise right there. The president can make treaties, but the Constitution says in Article 2, Section 2, that the president makes those treaties with the advice and consent of the Senate. So if it's a treaty, which this one is not, then the Senate has to approve it. They have to get the advice and they have to get the consent of the Senate. But since it's an MOU, the president can do it, and there's generally no oversight over it. But it's not a binding agreement. It's just simply a memorandum of understanding. And ask Ukraine how binding memorandums are. They're definitely not.
They never work and really have no enforcement power whatsoever. So it actually does appear that this is something that the president can do, but as far as making a treaty, that will require the consent of 2/3 of the Senate to be able to see that a treaty is ratified on the issue. But this is not a treaty, it's a memorandum. So I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here, also, by the way, I see people saying, what is a memorandum of understanding? Basically, that's fancy language for saying that they agree to talk about issues in the future. That's basically it right there. It's basically like the equivalent of like writing something on a napkin, and then, nobody really signs it, but they wrote some points on the napkin, and they'll like start debating it a little bit later. So you might be able to tell it doesn't really have a whole bunch of meaning behind it. That's generally sort of what a memo is for the most part. Which, like I said, ask Ukraine about that. The Budapest Memorandum, which was also a memo, wasn't very much adhered to a large degree. But moving on to our next one here, this one is going to go to none other than Herds, who said, can you explain how propaganda originates? And is the U.S. less affected by it than a communist country?
No, the U.S. is heavily affected by propaganda. It's just not usually it's not national propaganda. It's usually political propaganda from political parties, which unfortunately many of our fellow countrymen fall hook, line, and sinker for sucking down Kool-Aid like there's no tomorrow on both ends. But the U.S. is very susceptible to propaganda, much like any other country. It's just that it doesn't take a national form. It usually takes a political party form if we're speaking about the political side of things. There's also a lot of other propaganda that goes around the United States on a myriad of other things. Interestingly enough, most of the time, corporate propaganda. Back in the day, a lot of the tobacco corporations back in the 50s and whatnot actually would push huge propaganda campaigns and advertising to make it sound like smoking and the inhalation of tobacco smoke was actually healthy for people rather than detrimental to their health, which it really is. So, generally, I would say that propaganda is very influential in the United States because people are people everywhere. And if you throw some propaganda in front of some people are so gullible, they'll fall for it hook, line, and sinker. Like if you tell someone in America or China over and over and over that this person, like whoever it is just the greatest person alive, they walk on water and perform miracles, if you tell them that enough times, they'll just eventually believe it, because that sort of mental conditioning is actually quite easy to do on most people, and so then whatever they do, they'll just justify it. Like if Xi Jinping runs China into the ground, most Chinese citizens will tell you that he's not running into the ground, and in fact it's fine. He's a great guy, they love him, because there's a huge propaganda machine around him. Kind of similar right now with like the US president in a degree. There's a decent chunk of the country, the president could literally, like unconditionally surrender the United States to the Chinese and make the United States a puppet state, and they'd say it's the greatest thing done in humankind. Like, that's what they would say. But as far as propaganda would go, propaganda generally works off the concept, usually of creating an us versus them sort of a motivation, which usually is one of the driving sorts of epicenters of most propaganda. It relies on putting you versus someone else. So here in the United States internally, that would be the Democrats against the Republicans against the Democrats. On a national level, like we do it, it's the United States versus our enemies, the Russian Federation, China, and Iran. Like we do propaganda here as well, if you want to call that propaganda. And we put the United States and our allies against our common enemies and say these people are trying to destroy our way of life, which they legitimately are, and that's why we have to fight against it. Or you can see propaganda done on a myriad of other things that are completely untrue. Like, for example, you could hear someone make a propaganda story, or what we call here in America advertising, telling you that a certain kind of product is the best kind in the world. That's technically propaganda. Some people would call that advertising, but really anything that is done as a psychological operation to convince someone of something is generally considered propaganda. So that's kind of like the base point of propaganda, but the most powerful propaganda always puts someone up against a common enemy. It could be a domestic enemy, it could be a foreign enemy, but it has to be something identifiable, and you have to put key parameters on it to get people kind of riled up to go up against something, or to follow you and your lead to go and do something for some reason. If like, for example, if I say, it's really nice, it would be really nice for us to have public parks in America that are well kept and high end for the American public to appreciate and enjoy. How many people are going to get on board with that? Absolutely nobody. There's no anger or malice or hatred involved in that at all. It's a nice thing to do just to do it. No one's really going to hop on board. If I tell you something like, the People's Republic of China and the Chinese Communist Party is trying to undermine our way of life through foreign influence, and they're trying to destroy the way that you live, we need to rally against them and spend even more money on the military to get ready to fight them. More people are going to hop on board with that automatically because there's a common enemy to put their frustrations and anger they just feel in their everyday life against than they would ever saying or supporting something like, more funding for public parks, which is kind of an interesting thing about how it works. And that's also why when, I talk about ever running for president, I tell y'all I'm probably not going to be getting that far in the vote because I'd probably be focusing on things that people wouldn't rally around a whole lot, like, funding for public parks and improving the common good of the citizens of the United States. But I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from how I know propaganda to work. And it actually appears that we're getting some fresh info out of Rybinsk. Matthew, what do we got coming out of there?
Holy cow. Show them the footage of Rybinsk, the oil disaster inside of Russia that we covered earlier. Oh my goodness. Look at that. Play the video. It's 5 seconds. Let's let the people see this. That looks like a tornado. That's the oil cloud right there. It's not even a tornado. That's the oil cloud. Look at the skies, though. That's the main thing I'm looking at right now. I'm pretty certain that most of that black cloud matter you're seeing up there is actually the oil that's currently congregating within the clouds themselves. So that's why they're experiencing oil rain, is that right there. That's literally what's raining down on their heads.
That looks like something out of a horror movie, honestly. Like The Fog, like that movie about the mist or whatever it was. That looks like the beginning of the movie The Mist.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, this is probably about to turn into Cancer Alley through here. Like, that's very bad right there. Get all that nasty petroleum, crude to the large degree. It is crude, actually, just falling down on people's houses, heads, and cars, water tables, and everything. That's bad.
Man. That's unreal. Honestly, that footage right there is wild. I would say, that's something else. I mean, that's insane footage right there. I don't even know what to make of it. That's just apocalyptic looking, really. So I hope that y'all enjoyed that little glimpse of Rybinsk right there. Like a little look at hell. Man, like you're like, hey, you want to see some footage? I was like, yeah, sure. And then everyone in the audience was like, yeah. And then we look at that, and you just hear in the distance, oh, help me. And it's like, oh my God. It's like, bro, Rybinsk is in hell. Like, it's like, that's terrible.
Yikes. I tell you what, I honestly, like I said before on Two Ops, I hate to see that. Like, I understand Ukraine has to do what they got to do. It's a war. And right now, obviously, the oil industry is being used to fuel the Russian military. But I hate to see that, though, because like those ecological disasters like that is, like we've gone over before, very hard to clean up. It's pretty much irreversible once stuff like that happens. So on one respect, I hate to see it because a lot of, animals, the environment, and also the innocent civilians that are inside of Russia are going to suffer from that. But obviously, though, that's what war is. And that's why maybe the Russian people should put a stop to it and maybe put some pressure on their government. Because if they all rose up, if all the ants decided to rise up, the grasshoppers would have to listen eventually. So, maybe they will, maybe they won't, but they're paying the price for it.
They definitely are. They're definitely paying a price, a heavy one. So we'll have to see how that goes. But with that, outside of that wild video, it's time for us to move on and into the next one.
And this one here goes to N. Hansen. And thank you very much, N. Hansen, for the question. They said, curious thought. Does crude oil and fertilizer do the same thing as diesel and fertilizer? I'm wondering if the fields are going to be explosive.
I'm not entirely sure in Hanson. I actually don't know. But you know something that's an interesting fact about fertilizers is that there is a lot of nitrogen in fertilizer. And there's actually a sort of an ecological issue that's going on nowadays with the nitrogenification, or I believe that's how it's said, of waterways and watersheds within the United States because of heavy agriculture. That's actually something that's been causing high acidity within the Mississippi River over the past few decades, is the humongous uses of fertilizers in the areas around the Mississippi watershed, and then it all flows into the Mississippi River and then vents out into the Gulf. You can actually see that on water charts and whatnot. When it's graphed out, the nitrogenification of the area is really something else. In places like the Chesapeake Bay, where the nitrogenification is very high these days, fish will just straight up die if they swim into that stuff. It's like carbon monoxide for them. They'll usually die within seconds or a minute of exposure, and they'll just flip over dead and float to the surface. So a pretty wild thing about fertilizers as a side fact, but I'm not entirely sure if they have the same kind of chemical reaction as diesel and fertilizer. Matthew, can you pull that up really quickly and see if that is the case?
Let me see what the case is real quick. Let's see here. Let me see if I can get a quick answer to it. Let's see here. It's gonna take me a minute to look it up, you know.
Oh, don't worry, no pressure. Like, man, like, it's gonna take me a minute. I was like, no, man, like, there's no pressure at all.
So, I'm not a chemist, but I'm not something of a scientist myself. But crude oil mixed with ammonium nitrate fertilizer can work similarly to diesel and fertilizer, which is also known as ANFO, by the way. And y'all might recognize ANFO. That's a very explosive mixture, to say the least. That's an explosive. They say it might not be quite as optimized as the first, but it can work. The downside is it's just a highly explosive. That's the downside. So yeah, it would create basically fields of death, essentially.
Interesting. That's not good though. Like that's not good. But yeah, I guess that is basically the same reaction, I suppose. So I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have here a question from Chef Danny B. And thank you very much, Chef Danny, for the question. He said, with this withdrawal that we're seeing out of Crimea at the naval bases by the Russians, how close is Ukraine to winning the war?
I would still say that right now they're probably a year or a year and a half out from winning if things kept going their way this well and they took advantage of perfect situations every time they occurred and they won massive victories in those instances. It probably is still going to go on for another year or a year and a half, but I think that we're starting to get into the twilight hours of the war in Ukraine, to put it that way, and I think that's probably going to start rounding out to a close. You're probably within, I would say, the next year and a half, I would assume. So I hope that has addressed that well, Chef Danny B. Official chef of the LC. Great question, by the way. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a 5 from Michael Forsyth, and thank you, Michael, for the 5. He said, in Russia, it doesn't rain cats and dogs. It rains oil and Russian generals.
Yeah, it actually does. Man, we got a slight chance of oil today. We got a general storm going on outside right now.
Yeah. Also, by the way, people, like, can you imagine that, by the way? Like, here's how it works, or at least here's how I've heard it works. If the Russians want to knock you off, like as a Russian general or something like that, they literally send 3 guys. They'll send them out to the apartment or wherever these people live at. They'll have them waiting there for them to show up after work, like you literally see in the movies. In some movies they'll have it like where there's assassins like waiting in the house for somebody to show up after they get off work or something. They'll be sitting in the dark. That's literally how I've heard they do it. They'll let the person come in. It'll generally be pretty calm, and they'll just carry out what they got to carry out once they arrive there, and they'll make it look like it was something that they did to themselves, but it'll actually be an assassination. That's usually how they do it, and they throw people out of windows because it's really hard to find out what happened because there's no there's no forensics left behind to a large degree. There's no like bullet casing, there's no rifling to look at or anything like that because there is none. They simply threw them out the window. So it's really ominous, but that's how it works.
Also, to speak about it, kind of like a criminology side of things, if someone looks like they obviously kind of like, off themselves, there's really never an investigation into that. ever. And if there was, they could, the order could just come down from the top. Like the FSB could just call the police chief and say, stop any sort of investigation into that as a possible homicide. And the police chief will tell them, all right, that's closed up. The FSB said it wasn't a homicide, case closed. And that ends there. But generally it won't even, that won't even happen. They won't even investigate it because the local police that show up and find the guy dead are just going to go, oh, looks like he jumped out of his apartment, fell 10 stories, and there's a note up there. Kind of case, closed, open and shut thing, looks like that, moving on. And that also gives the Russian government culpable deniability because then they never, no one ever says, hey, this guy looks like he was killed by foul play. This looks like a homicide of some sort. And then there's an investigation that might expose the Russian government.
Man, those local police departments aren't equipped to do any type of investigation. Like the Russians don't do that type of stuff. They don't work that way. And also, if something looks suspicious, like for example, you have a Russian general fall out of a 10-story window, I think it might just be understood without any messages being sent directly between the Kremlin and the local police department. It's just kind of understood that let's not look too deep into this. Let's just leave it be, or otherwise we might upset the apple cart, and we don't want to find ourselves on the end of a problem either. So they kind of just let it go.
Also, and there's probably also the added thing as well, like if they're thinking outside of that, it's like, oh, well, it was a general, and if we say that there's foul play, that could create a national scandal, and probably at that point, like the national government gets involved directly on the behalf of the FSB and just says, no, don't investigate that. That could create a national scandal if there was some foul play involved. Not that they're saying it's them. They're just saying if there was foul play involved, it might be a national scandal. So just say that he jumped out of a window or something, so that way we can make it cut short and sweet, not make it that big of a deal, and not bring too much heat to the government in any way, internationally or domestically. So let's just wrap it up here. They could also be saying that as well behind the scenes, because usually in the United States, folks, if anyone high profile does die in odd circumstances, like even in America, there's going, like, the press in America doesn't have the restrictions that they have in Russia, and neither do the police, but there's always a huge push by the people who are kind of involved and knew that person that aren't a part of law enforcement or the press to try and streamline everything as much as they can and go, oh, it was unfortunate. Like, a lot of y'all probably don't know this, but when FDR died, they had to go and get his mistress out of the house that he was in when he was getting his portrait painted that day, so that way they could call his wife up. They didn't call his wife for 30 minutes because they had to say, he's dead, and then go into the next room, beat it, you bro, like, get the mistress out, and then they're like, shit, we gotta call Eleanor, and then they called her, and then nobody knew that back then. Nobody knew that at all because they said, it's a high-profile guy who's the president. We don't want everyone to know that he had a mistress around, so let's just bury that one, and let's just say that he just died getting a portrait painted down in Georgia from, like, a heart attack or whatnot, and that's what they said. And so nobody knew that until a good while later when it was finally leaked out that, the guy had a mistress there. He was cheating on his wife, and, they had to kick out the mistress before they called her to let her know her husband died. So, kind of an interesting thing to note with that as well, is that if it's a high-profile figure, the fact it might create a scandal to bring out anything about how they actually died, it could also lead them to just close it as quickly as possible. But with that, we're on the next one.
Our next question here goes to Gandalf, who said, wouldn't a ceasefire be bad for Ukraine?
A ceasefire with Iran? Or with...
No, wouldn't a ceasefire be bad for Ukraine?
Generally, I would say, yeah. I mean, continued pressure is what you want in a war. You never want to just end it for a little while for no reason. So I'd say, yeah, ceasefire is pretty bad. The Ukrainians should be pushing for victory at this point and keeping the pressure on the Russians to make sure that they're not in a position where they can sit back and regroup or rebuild. So I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a question here from none other than J.B. Najalki. He said, it seems like Putin's at a crossroads, and a deal with Ukraine, start a war with NATO and threaten nukes to get a better deal or nuke something. And which option do you think he'll take, or the other, in LSA?
I think he's going to start a war with NATO and threaten nukes, because anything against Ukraine is kind of not really dealing with the primary issue, and then who knows how the Europe will or NATO will be reacting to that at large once that happens. If they go to war with NATO and threaten nukes, then they're going kind of to the source of the matter. If NATO backs off and gives significant concessions where they completely isolate Ukraine and stop supporting them because of the threat of nuclear annihilation in a conventional war against Russia, then Russia might actually have a chance of eventually whittling the Ukrainians down, possibly, and then possibly getting some sort of a concession from the Ukrainians in that war where they actually end up coming out on top, and they came out on top on the international foreign policy side of things as well. So I think that's what they're generally going for. So I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to none other than Mark Hooper, who said, "What is the Russian replacement level for soldiers? And they must be losing more than they can replace."
For a while they have. We believe that they're bringing in about 1,100 new volunteers daily, volunteers or volunteers, whichever way you want to put it, daily into the Russian army right now, while they're losing about 1,400. That's what we've heard lately. I think that was like a month and a half to 2 months ago, is currently the replacement rate, which is at a deficit. So they're actually losing about a battalion tactical group worth of manpower that's not being replaced every 2 days in the Russian army. So it's not a good rate whatsoever. They're running out of men. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have here a question from your local groundhog, who said, "If Ukraine takes Crimea from Russia and they get forced into a peace deal for whatever reason, will they give up Donetsk and Luhansk, or will they fight to the end?"
I have a feeling that they're going to try and fight till the end if Putin's in charge, but by the point that everything's lost in the south, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and also Crimea, I think that the Donbass is going to be a done and sold for deal, because there's probably going to be a government overthrow attempt in Russia at that point, and that would destabilize the situation so badly that the Russian army probably wouldn't put up any resistance, and they'd probably just start withdrawing out of the Donbass to leave the conflict. So I think that that's generally the kind of situation that we would be looking at that point. But if Putin is in charge, the premise is to fight to the death, basically. So with that, I hope that has addressed that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. So who is the last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Ella MC Wheels Nafo, who said, "Question for y'all. How come we never see the Russian version of the Sea Whiz?"
They don't actually have any land-based version of a Sea Whiz. They have the naval-based version. I think it's called the AK-730 or something. Let me see here. Russian Sea Whiz. Let me see if I can pull this up here. The AK-630, I was actually kind of close, but this is the Russian version of a Sea Whiz. The little shit is terrible, actually. Like, we've seen these things actually try and shoot at Ukrainian drones, and the spread on the rounds that are fired from this thing is so bad, it's completely inaccurate. So, honestly, like, it's probably lucky they don't have any land-based versions of these, like, if I'm being completely honest, because they probably do worse for air defense, but that's why you really don't see them, is because they're basically just naval only, and they have no land-based variant of it like we have, like the CRAM. They just have the naval-based variant. So I hope that that does address that the best we possibly can. And a big thanks to you, by the way, for asking a very great question, Ellen McWheels Nafo, to round this thing on out for the night. And so, I gotta say, a humongous thanks to everybody so much once again for watching. We've been able to hit an unbelievable level on this fundraiser tonight of $3,182 raised for none other than Razom for Ukraine. And I gotta give a humongous thanks to every single one of y'all who has supported that fundraiser massively tonight. And I also gotta say a big thanks to the 102,000 people that watched the stream over the 3 hours that's been live on air. We also had a peak viewership tonight of 16,000 people, quite a lot of people. And we are always appreciative of so many of y'all considering this channel to be a primary source of news. We will be seeing you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 48 hours of the news from around the world. And if there is a short war video to be made tomorrow, Enforcer Matt will be the one making that short war video. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, Herom Slava, long live the Lee Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, we will see you all maybe tomorrow on that short war video if there is enough news to cover. Tomorrow is my day on Monday, so if there is news to put out, you can pretty much guarantee it. There will be a video coming out from yours truly, Enforcer Matt, to cover that news. But in the meantime, though, we will see you all definitely on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next Night of the War News stream. And also a huge shout out to everybody once again for helping us to hit way above that fundraiser goal. A huge shout out once again. We're currently at $3,200 raised as of right now. So a huge shout out and thank you all for helping us to hit that goal yet again. And we will see you all, like I said, on Tuesday. And with that, of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.
Stand up, Nami